Tonight, you're about to discover an ancient secret that Buddhist monks have guarded for thousands of years, a way to transform the restless mind into profound and peaceful rest. I'm going to share timeless Zen stories that have guided countless souls from the torment of sleepless nights into the deepest, most nurturing sleep they've ever known. Within each tale lies a hidden key, one that awakens your mind's forgotten ability to release every burden, every worry, every fragment of stress that keeps you awake. But here's what sets this session apart from ordinary sleep meditations. These teachings work even if you've never meditated before. This is true even if your mind is racing like a wild horse, even if you've tried everything else and nothing has helped. The Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." Soon, you'll not just know these words, you'll live, breathe, and embody them. As we journey through tales of empty boats, wise masters, and unexpected wisdom, something remarkable will begin to happen. Your tension will start to dissolve, your thoughts will begin to slow, and you'll find yourself naturally sinking into a state of profound relaxation that you may have forgotten was possible. So make yourself comfortable now. Adjust your pillow until it feels just right. Let your body sink into your comfortable bed, surrendering its weight completely. Take one deep breath with me now, breathing in slowly. And as you exhale, know that you've just taken the first step on a journey that has been waiting for you since the beginning of time. Let's begin with our first story. It speaks to the power of undivided attention and the freedom that comes from releasing self-consciousness. This is the story of the master archer. In ancient China, there lived an archer whose skill had become legend throughout the empire. His arrows flew true in any weather, splitting previous arrows with perfect precision, finding their mark even in the dimmest light. The emperor himself had witnessed his abilities and declared him the finest archer in all the land, showering him with gold and honors. Young archers traveled great distances to study with him, hoping to unlock the secrets of his mastery. One such student, after months of dedicated practice, had developed considerable skill. He could hit distant targets, shoot multiple arrows in rapid succession, and perform the formal movements with grace. Yet he sensed something was still missing, a quality his master possessed that eluded his grasp. One morning, the master observed his student practicing. The young man's form was excellent, his concentration intense. Arrow after arrow struck near the center of the target. When he finished, he turned eagerly to his teacher. "Master," he said, bowing deeply, "I have practiced diligently as you taught. My accuracy improves daily, yet I feel there's some secret you haven't shared. What special technique makes your arrows never miss? What hidden knowledge separates a skilled archer from a true master?" The old archer studied his student thoughtfully. "Your technique is indeed skillful," he said, "but come with me tomorrow at dawn. Bring your bow and arrows. There's something I must show you." The next morning, in the grey light before sunrise, the master led his student up a mountain path. They climbed in silence for hours, the way growing steeper and more treacherous. Finally, they emerged onto a narrow ledge that jutted out over a deep gorge. Far below, mist obscured the bottom of the chasm. The ledge itself was barely wide enough for one person to stand. The master stepped onto the precipice as casually as if walking in his garden. He positioned himself at the very edge, toes extending slightly over the void. Drawing his bow, he nocked an arrow and sent it flying into the distance with fluid grace. Then another, and another, each movement perfect, his body as stable as the mountain itself. Stepping back, he gestured to his student. "Now you." The young archer approached the edge cautiously. As he looked down into the dizzying depths, his heart began racing. His palms grew damp. When he tried to step where his master had stood, his legs trembled. He forced himself forward, but vertigo overwhelmed him. His hands shook as he attempted to draw his bow. The arrow slipped from his fingers before he could aim. Stumbling back to solid ground, he stood with head bowed, face flushed with shame. "Master, I cannot do it. The height, the danger, they fill my mind. My body refuses to obey. How can you stand there so calmly?" The master returned to safe ground and placed a gentle hand on his student's shoulder. "Now you understand the difference between us," he said. "When I shoot, there is only the bow, the arrow, and the target. Nothing else exists. No thought of falling, no awareness of danger, no concern for success or failure, not even a self who shoots. There is only shooting itself." He continued, "You missed not because your skill failed, but because you were divided. Part of you aimed the arrow, while another part feared the cliff. Part tried to impress me, while another worried about failure. Part maintained your balance, while another imagined falling. How can an arrow fly true when the archer himself flies in so many directions?" The young man listened intently as understanding began to dawn. "True mastery," the master explained, "comes not from eliminating fear or forcing courage, but from becoming so completely absorbed in the action that there's no room for such divisions. When archer, bow, arrow, and target merge into one movement, one moment, one totality, that is when the arrow cannot miss, for there is nothing separate that could interfere." "But how do I achieve this unity?" the student asked. "By practicing not just archery, but presence itself. Each time you draw your bow, gather all of yourself into that single action. Let there be no yesterday's successes, no tomorrow's goals, no audience watching, no self to protect. Only this breath, this draw, this release. When you can shoot with your whole being, undivided by hope or fear, then you will understand why my arrows find their mark, not because I am skilled, but because I am not there to get in the way." The Buddha taught, when walking, just walk. When sitting, just sit. Above all, don't wobble. This instruction points to the same undivided presence the master archer embodied, action without the interference of self-consciousness, movement without internal conflict. How often we divide ourselves just as the young archer did. We lie in bed trying to sleep, while simultaneously monitoring whether sleep is coming. We attempt to relax while anxiously checking if we're relaxed yet. Part of us reaches for rest, while another part worries it won't arrive. This division itself becomes the obstacle. Tonight, as you rest here, notice where you might be standing on your own precipice, divided between intention and fear, between letting go and holding on. Perhaps part of you wants to surrender to sleep, while another part maintains vigilant watch. Maybe you're trying to quiet your mind while simultaneously judging every thought that arises. What would it be like to gather all of yourself into this simple moment? Not pushing towards sleep, not monitoring your progress, not comparing tonight to other nights. Simply being here, whole and undivided, like an arrow resting on the string before release. The Master's secret was not superhuman steadiness or the absence of all thought. It was the absence of division, no gap between himself and his action, no space for self-consciousness to create interference. When we stop splitting ourselves into the doer and the watcher, the seeker and the judge, we discover the same effortless accuracy available in every moment. Let each breath be your arrow, released without commentary or correction. Let your body sink into the bed without checking if it's sinking properly. Let thoughts arise and pass without the added thought about whether you should be thinking. This is the Archer's teaching. Not that we must be perfect, but that we must be whole. When every part of you gathers into this single moment of rest, without division, without resistance, then like the Master's arrow, you cannot miss your target. The cliff's edge taught what the practice field could not. That true mastery lies not in controlling our experience, but in releasing the controller. Tonight, on the safe ground of your bed, you can discover the same truth. Let go of the one who tries to sleep. Let there be only sleeping itself, as natural and undivided as an arrow's flight through empty space. Our next story reveals how our own fullness can prevent us from receiving what we truly need. This is the story of the empty cup. In the mountains of Japan, there lived a Zen master known for his simple ways and profound wisdom. His small temple attracted seekers from across the land, though he rarely spoke more than necessary and owned little beyond his meditation cushion and tea set. One autumn day, a university professor made the long journey to visit this master. The professor was renowned throughout the academic world for his scholarly knowledge of Buddhism. He had written numerous books analyzing Zen philosophy, comparing different schools of thought, and documenting the historical development of various teachings. His mind was sharp, his arguments precise, and his reputation formidable. As he climbed the mountain path, the professor rehearsed the questions he would ask, the points he wished to debate. He looked forward to engaging this master in sophisticated philosophical discourse, perhaps even impressing him with the depth of his understanding. The master greeted him warmly at the temple gate, bowing slightly. "Welcome," he said simply. "You must be tired from your journey. Please, come in for tea." The professor, though eager to begin their discussion, accepted the hospitality. They sat on cushions across from each other, a low wooden table between them. As the master began preparing the tea with deliberate, mindful movements, the professor could no longer contain himself. "Master," he began, "I have studied Zen extensively. I know the teachings of Dogen, the koans of Hakuin, the various lineages and their interpretations. I've compared Zen with other Buddhist schools, and even with Western philosophy. What I seek to understand is..." The master continued his tea preparation, listening quietly as the professor expounded his knowledge. The scholarly man quoted sutras, analyzed paradoxes, referenced obscure texts. He spoke of emptiness and form, of sudden versus gradual enlightenment, of the relationship between Zen and the arts. His words flowed like a river that had burst its banks, flooding the small room with concepts and theories. When the water was ready, The master placed a small ceramic cup before his guest and began to pour. The professor, still mid-sentence about the nature of Buddha mind, barely glanced at the tea. The master poured slowly, steadily. The cup filled to the brim, but the master didn't stop pouring. Tea overflowed the rim, spreading across the table, dripping onto the professor's expensive robes, pooling on the floor. Still the master poured, his expression serene and focused. "Stop!" the professor cried, jumping to his feet. "Can't you see? The cup is already full. No more will go in." The master set down the teapot and looked directly at his guest. For the first time since the professor's arrival, he spoke more than a few words. "Like this cup," he said gently, "you are full of your own ideas, opinions, and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" The professor stood frozen, tea still dripping from his robes. In that moment, the truth of the master's words penetrated deeper than any text he had studied. All his knowledge, rather than bringing him closer to understanding, had become a barrier. His cup was so full of concepts about Zen that there was no room for the direct experience of Zen itself. Slowly, the professor sat back down. This time, he was silent. The master cleaned up the spilled tea with a cloth, then prepared fresh cups for them both. They sat together in the quiet afternoon, sipping tea, watching clouds drift past the window. No words were exchanged, yet in that wordless space, the professor began to taste something he had never found in all his books: the actual flavor of Zen, simple and immediate as green tea on the tongue. The Buddha taught, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few." How often we come to each moment already full of assumptions about how things should be, full of yesterday's experiences, full of tomorrow's plans. Our mental cups overflow with opinions, judgments, and certainties, leaving no space for fresh insight or new understanding. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, notice the fullness of your own cup. Perhaps it contains the day's unfinished business, swirling thoughts about what went wrong or right. Maybe it holds worries about tomorrow, plans and contingencies filling every available space. Or it might be brimming with ideas about sleep itself, how long it should take, how deep it should be, what you need to do to achieve it. But what if, like the professor, you could let your cup empty? What if you could pour out the accumulated thoughts, the need to understand, the effort to make something happen? In Zen practice, we discover that emptiness is not a lack, but a readiness. An empty cup can receive. An empty mind can rest. As you lie here, with each exhale, imagine pouring out a little more from your cup. Let the thoughts flow out and away, creating space, creating openness. You don't need to push or force. Simply allow the natural emptying that comes with releasing each breath. And in that growing spaciousness, notice what begins to appear. Like the professor who finally tasted real tea only after his concepts were cleared away, you might discover that the peace you seek doesn't need to be added to your experience. It's already here, waiting in the empty space, ready to fill you with its quiet presence. The Master's teaching echoes through the centuries. How can rest come to a mind already full? First, we must empty our cup. Then, naturally and without effort, the sweet darkness of sleep can pour in, filling every space with its perfect stillness. Let us now explore a story about finding wisdom in unexpected solutions. This is the story of the heavy stone. In a mountain village where morning mist clung to pine forests and eagles circled ancient peaks, life followed rhythms unchanged for generations. The villagers rose with the sun, tended their fields, and traveled the main road that connected their homes to the market town below. This road was their lifeline. Along it came traders with necessities, relatives for festivals, and monks seeking alms. One spring night, the mountains shook with unusual force. When dawn broke, the villagers discovered that a massive boulder had broken free from the cliff face above, tumbling down to rest squarely in the middle of their road. The stone was enormous, taller than a man, wider than an ox cart, its grey surface still bearing fresh scars from its violent descent. The village elder called everyone together. This was a crisis. The planting season was beginning, and farmers needed to transport their goods. Children walked this road to school. The sick travelled it to reach the healer in the next valley. The strongest men stepped forward first. "We'll move it," they declared, rolling up their sleeves. They positioned themselves around the boulder, braced their backs, and pushed with all their might. The stone didn't budge, not even a finger's width. They tried again, recruiting more helpers, coordinating their efforts. Still nothing. Next came the craftsmen with their tools. "If we cannot move it whole, we'll break it into pieces." They brought hammers and chisels, working from dawn to dusk. But this was no ordinary stone. It seemed harder than iron itself. Their tools barely scratched its surface, some breaking against its unyielding face. Someone suggested digging. "Perhaps we can excavate around it, create a depression, and roll it aside." But the mountain soil was rocky and firm, packed tight by centuries. After days of exhausting labor, they had barely made a dent. Frustration grew. Arguments broke out. Some blamed the mountain spirits. Others said it was punishment for forgotten offenses. The road remained blocked, and with each passing day, the inconvenience grew more burdensome. Finally, they decided to seek help from a Zen master who lived in a hermitage higher up the mountain. He was known for solving problems through unexpected wisdom. The elder and several villagers made the climb, finding the master tending his small garden. After hearing their plight, the master agreed to come. The whole village gathered as he slowly made his way down the path, leaning on his walking stick. Everyone waited eagerly to hear what ingenious method he would propose. The master walked around the boulder slowly, touching its surface, observing it from every angle. He looked at the road, the surrounding forest, the watching crowd. The silence stretched long. Finally, he spoke. "Why must the stone be moved?" The villagers were bewildered. "Because it blocks our road," several voices called out. "We cannot pass with our carts. Travel is difficult and dangerous." The master nodded thoughtfully. "I see a stone. I see a road. But must the road always run through the same place?" He pointed with his stick to the left of the boulder, where the forest grew close. "What if the road went here? Then to the right, where the ground sloped gently? Or here?" But this has always been the road," someone protested. "And now it is not," the master replied simply. "The mountain has spoken. Perhaps it's time for a new path." At first, the villagers resisted. Change the road that had existed since their grandparents' time. Create a new way when the old way had always served. But the master continued, "This stone, is it only an obstacle? Or might it be showing you something? Look how it sits, a natural marker, a place to rest in its shade, a gathering point. Children will play on it. Travelers will know they've reached your village when they see it. What blocks one path may create another." Slowly, understanding dawned. Working together with renewed energy, the villagers cleared brush and leveled ground. They discovered that the new path was actually gentler than the old, with better drainage during rain. The curve around the boulder created a natural widening where carts could pass more easily. Within a moon's cycle, smooth new road embraced both sides of the stone. The boulder, once seen as a disaster, became exactly what the master predicted: a landmark, a meeting place, a monument to their village's ability to adapt and transform. Before departing, the master offered one final teaching. Some obstacles cannot be conquered by force or will or clever tools. They can only be embraced. What we cannot change, we must change our relationship to. The stone didn't move, but wisdom did. The Buddha taught, if you are facing in the right direction, all you need to do is keep walking. Sometimes the right direction isn't through our obstacles, but around them, not conquering, but incorporating, not forcing, but flowing. How often in our lives do we exhaust ourselves pushing against immovable stones? We lie awake wrestling with problems that won't yield to force, trying to make thoughts stop through sheer will, attempting to push ourselves into sleep like those villagers pushing against granite. But what if, like the master suggested, we could find another way? What if the very thoughts that seem to block our path to rest could become landmarks in a new landscape of acceptance? That worry about tomorrow that sits heavy in your mind, what if instead of trying to move it, you could let the path of your attention flow gently around it? That replaying of today's difficult conversation, solid as stone in your awareness, what if it could simply remain while you discover new routes to peace on either side? The villagers learned that some stones are meant to stay where they fall. Our work isn't always to clear the path, but sometimes to find a new one. Tonight, as you rest here, notice what heavy stones you've been trying to move. Feel how exhausting that effort has been. And now, with the master's wisdom, consider, what if you don't need to move them at all? What if rest can flow around whatever remains unmoved, finding its own way, like water finding its course down a mountainside? Let your breathing be that new path, curving naturally around whatever obstacles remain. No forcing, no pushing, just the gentle persistence of finding another way. And perhaps you'll discover, as the villagers did, that the new path is actually smoother, more graceful than the old one ever was. The stone remains, but you have found your way to rest. Let us now explore a story about uncovering what has always been present within us. This is the story of polishing the mirror. In a mountain monastery where ancient pines whispered secrets to the wind, a young monk named Hui Ming had devoted himself to intensive practice for 7 long years. He rose before dawn for meditation, studied the sutras with fierce determination, performed every ritual with precision, and served his community with tireless dedication. Yet despite all his efforts, the enlightenment he sought remained elusive as morning mist. Each passing season deepened his frustration. He watched fellow monks have breakthrough experiences while he remained trapped in ordinary consciousness. He doubled his efforts: longer meditations, stricter fasting, more prostrations. Still, the profound realization described in the texts eluded him. His heart grew heavy with the fear that perhaps he lacked the capacity for awakening. One evening, exhausted and disheartened, Huiming approached his teacher, an elderly master whose eyes held depths of compassion earned through decades of practice. "Master," he said, his voice thick with desperation, "I have given everything to this path. I follow every precept, complete every practice, study every teaching. Yet I feel no closer to enlightenment than the day I arrived. What am I doing wrong? Is there some secret teaching you haven't shared? Some special method I haven't learned?" The old master regarded him with infinite kindness. Without speaking, he rose and beckoned Huiming to follow. They walked through darkening corridors to a storage room at the monastery's far corner, a place rarely visited, filled with forgotten artifacts and dusty relics. In the deepest shadows, covered by cobwebs and decades of neglect, sat an ancient bronze mirror. Once it must have been magnificent. Huiming could see hints of intricate engravings around its edges, but now its surface was completely obscured by a thick crust of tarnish and grime, giving back no reflection whatsoever. "Do you see this mirror?" the master asked softly. "Yes, master, though it's so corroded I can barely tell it's a mirror at all." "Tell me," the master continued, "was this mirror's ability to reflect created by the dust and tarnish covering it?" Huiming frowned at the strange question. "Of course not, master. The mirror's reflective nature exists beneath the accumulation. The dirt merely obscures what's already there. And if you wish to see your face in this mirror, what would you do?" "I would clean it, master. Remove all the build-up until the original surface emerged." The master nodded and handed Huiming a soft cloth. "Then begin." For days, Huiming worked on the ancient mirror. The years of oxidation resisted his efforts. He tried water, then oil, then fine sand. Layer by layer, with patience he didn't know he possessed, he polished away the accumulation of decades. Sometimes progress was barely visible. Sometimes a section he thought was clean revealed deeper tarnish beneath. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, the mirror's true surface began to emerge. First, just small patches where light could catch and dance. Then larger areas of perfect reflection. The intricate engravings revealed themselves. Dragons and clouds, symbols of wisdom and transcendence. After weeks of dedicated work, the mirror was completely restored. Its surface now gleamed with such clarity that every detail of the room reflected perfectly within it. When Huiming brought the master to see his work, the old teacher smiled. "Now tell me," he said, "did your polishing create the mirror's capacity to reflect?" "No, master," Huiming replied, understanding beginning to dawn. "I only removed what was covering its natural state. The mirror's perfect reflecting nature was always there, waiting beneath the tarnish." So it is with your Buddha nature, the master explained. Enlightenment is not something you achieve through effort or acquire from outside. Your true nature, clear, luminous, perfectly aware, has been present from the beginning. It's never been absent, not for a single moment. Then what have I been doing all these years? Huiming asked. The same thing you did with this mirror, polishing. Your meditation, study, and ethical conduct don't create enlightenment. They remove the tarnish of delusion, the dust of attachment, the grime of false beliefs. Each practice clears away a bit more of what obscures your inherent wisdom. The master touched the gleaming surface gently. The dust on this mirror accumulated naturally over time through no fault of the mirror itself. Similarly, the obscurations covering your Buddha nature arose through causes and conditions, childhood conditioning, societal beliefs, misunderstandings passed down through generations. These coverings feel so thick and solid that we forget what lies beneath. But Master, Huiming said, if my true nature is already perfect, why is it so hard to see? Because you've been trying to add light to the mirror instead of removing what blocks it. You've been seeking enlightenment as if it were distant and foreign, not recognizing it as your most intimate nature. Tell me, while you were polishing, were you creating something new or revealing something eternal? Revealing, Master, always revealing. From that day forward, Huiming's practice transformed. Instead of striving to attain some future state, he focused on recognizing and releasing whatever clouded his natural clarity. He understood that every moment of awareness was the mirror shining through. Every act of kindness was tarnish falling away. The Buddha taught, "Look within, thou art the Buddha." This isn't a metaphorical encouragement, but a literal description of our deepest reality. The clear awareness reading these words right now. This is the mirror's surface, temporarily hosting thoughts and sensations that come and go like clouds reflected in still water. Tonight, as you rest, consider what tarnish might be obscuring your own inner mirror. Perhaps it's the day's accumulated stress, layers of worry about tomorrow, or old beliefs about what you should be experiencing. These coverings feel so real, so solid, just as the tarnish on the bronze seemed inseparable from the mirror itself. But beneath all of it, your original nature remains untouched, clear, peaceful, naturally luminous. You don't need to create this peace or import it from somewhere else. Like Huiming discovering the mirror's inherent perfection, you need only recognize what has always been present. With each breath, imagine you're gently polishing, not forcing, not scrubbing harshly, just the soft, patient work of allowing what's temporary to fall away. The thoughts are just tarnish. The tensions are just dust. Beneath them, your mirror-like awareness remains perfectly clear, reflecting everything yet stained by nothing. This is why rest comes so naturally when we stop trying to manufacture it. Sleep isn't an achievement, but a return, like a mirror finally freed from its coverings, reflecting the vast darkness of night with perfect clarity. The master's gift to Huiming wasn't new information, but a direct pointing to what the monk had carried all along. Tonight, receive the same gift. Your Buddha nature needs no improvement, no addition, no special attainment. It only asks to be recognized, like a mirror's surface, celebrating its freedom from dust. Let each exhale be a gentle polishing, Let each moment of letting go reveal a bit more of your natural shine. And trust that beneath whatever seems to obscure your peace, the clear mirror of your true nature waits patiently, perfect and whole, ready to reflect the infinite depth of rest. Our next story illuminates the difference between understanding teachings and experiencing their truth directly. This is the story of pointing at the moon. On a warm summer evening, when the full moon hung like a perfect pearl in the indigo sky, a Zen master walked with his most devoted student through the temple gardens. The student, young and earnest, carried a bundle of scrolls under his arm, texts he'd been studying with intense dedication. For months, this student had immersed himself in the ocean of Buddhist literature. He read every sutra he could find, memorized important passages, took detailed notes on commentaries. His cell was stacked with texts on emptiness and form, consciousness and liberation, the various paths and stages of realization. He could quote the Buddha's words on any topic, debate fine points of doctrine, and explain the differences between various schools of thought. Yet something troubled him deeply. The more he studied, the more confused he became. Different texts seemed to point in different directions. Some emphasized sudden awakening, others gradual cultivation. Some stressed meditation, others devotion, still others philosophical inquiry. The contradictions multiplied like shadows at crossroads. "Master," he said as they paused beside a quiet pond, "I've been studying diligently, but I feel more lost than when I began. This text says to empty the mind completely, while that one says to cultivate specific qualities. This teacher emphasizes effort. That one says effort itself is the obstacle. How can they all be true? How do I reconcile these contradictions?" The master listened patiently as the student continued, quoting various authorities, comparing interpretations, demonstrating the depth of his scholarly pursuit. The moon's reflection trembled on the pond's surface as a gentle breeze stirred the water. When the student finally fell silent, the master simply raised his hand and pointed at the full moon floating serenely above them. "Look," he said. The student glanced up at the moon, then back at his teacher, waiting for the explanation that would surely follow. But the master remained silent, his finger still pointing upward. After a long moment, the master asked, "What are you looking at? My finger or the moon?" "The moon, master. I'm looking at the moon." "Are you certain?" the master replied gently. "Or are you looking at my finger, waiting for it to reveal something about the moon?" The student's brow furrowed in concentration. The master continued, "All these texts you study, all these teachings you memorize, all these philosophies you compare, they are fingers pointing at the moon. The Buddha's words, the sutras, the commentaries, my own instructions, all just fingers. They point toward truth, but they are not truth itself." "But Master, how else can we understand if not through the teachings?" "Understanding comes not from analyzing the finger, but from looking where it points. Tell me, if I describe the moon to you for hours, explaining its brightness, its roundness, its movement across the sky, would you know the moon better than someone who simply looked up?" The student was quiet, beginning to grasp the import of this simple demonstration. "The teachings seem contradictory," the master explained, "because different fingers point from different positions. A finger pointing from the east looks different from one pointing from the west, yet both indicate the same moon. One teaching emphasizes effort because some students need encouragement to begin. Another emphasizes effortlessness because some students need to learn to let go. The medicine varies, but the healing aimed for is the same. Then how do I move beyond the fingers to see the moon directly? The master smiled. By the same way you see the moon right now, simply look. Don't think about the moon. Don't analyze its qualities. Don't compare what you see to what you've read. Just look. The moon doesn't require your concepts to shine. They stood together in silence, both gazing at the luminous orb above. The student noticed for the first time how the moonlight transformed everything it touched. The garden paths turned silver. Shadows became mysteries. Ordinary stones gleamed like treasures. All this had been present while he was buried in his texts, but he'd been too busy reading about light to notice its presence. "Master," he whispered, "I think I've been collecting fingers." "A natural mistake," the master replied kindly. "Fingers are easier to grasp than moonlight. We can organize them, compare them, debate their relative merits. But the moon itself cannot be captured in concepts any more than you can hold its reflection in the pond." As they resumed walking, the student felt the weight of the scrolls under his arm differently. They were still valuable, still worth studying, but now he understood their limitation. They were maps to a territory he'd forgotten to explore, menus for a meal he'd neglected to taste. The Buddha taught, "My teaching is like a finger pointing to the moon. Do not mistake the finger for the moon." How easy it is to become fascinated with fingers, collecting them, comparing them, arguing about which points most accurately, while the moon itself shines unnoticed above us. Tonight, you've heard many teachings, many stories, many pointers toward rest and peace. But notice, are you getting caught in analyzing these words, evaluating their truth, comparing them to other things you've learned? Or are you looking where they point? The peace these stories describe isn't hidden in the words themselves. Like the moon, it's already present, already shining, needing only your direct attention to be recognized. Each teaching is just another finger pointing toward the same simple truth. Peace is available now, in this moment, beyond all concepts about it. See how even now the mind wants to grasp this idea, to turn beyond concepts into another concept to understand. This is the habit that keeps us examining fingers while moonlight pours over us unnoticed. What if, just for tonight, you could let all the teachings go? Not because they're unimportant, but because you followed where they point and arrived at direct experience. The way a child knows the moon without any astronomy lessons. Immediate, obvious, undeniable. The moon of awareness shines equally whether you understand Buddhist philosophy or not. The moon of peace is full, whether you can explain it or remain silent. The moon of rest illuminates your experience right now, regardless of how many texts you've studied or how few. Let these words be a finger pointing toward your own direct experience. Look where they point, not at the pointing itself. Beyond all descriptions of peace lies peace itself. Beyond all concepts of rest lies rest itself. Beyond all ideas about who you are lies your original nature, bright as the full moon, clear as the night sky. The master's gift wasn't a new teaching, but a reminder to look up. Tonight, in the darkness of your room, the same gift is offered. Stop studying the finger. Turn your attention to where it points. The moon of your true nature has been shining all along, waiting patiently for you to simply look. Let us now explore a story about discovering wisdom in unexpected places, where the sacred meets the ordinary. This is the story of the Zen master and the dirty road. During the rainy season in Japan, when clouds hung low over the mountains and paths turned to rivers of mud, a group of monks set out on pilgrimage with their teacher. They had walked for days through the downpour, their straw sandals squelching with each step, robes splattered with earth, seeking various temples to deepen their practice. As they climbed a particularly treacherous path, slipping on wet stones and steadying each other through puddles, they glimpsed their destination through the mist, a magnificent temple crowning the hilltop above them. Even from a distance, its golden roof gleamed despite the grey weather, promising shelter and spiritual refinement. The disciples quickened their pace, eager to escape the muddy road. They spoke excitedly of the famous temple's reputation, its immaculate meditation hall, the precision of its ceremonies, the depth of its library. Here, surely, they would find profound teachings to elevate their understanding. When they finally arrived, the temple exceeded even their expectations. Monks in spotless robes glided through corridors of polished wood. Every surface shone with care. Incense perfumed the air with sandalwood and jasmine. Golden statues of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas gazed serenely from their platforms, while elaborate paintings depicted pure lands and enlightened beings. The visiting monks were welcomed, given clean robes, shown to the bathhouse to wash away their journey's dirt. Soon they sat in the pristine meditation hall, back straight, breathing regulated, surrounded by beauty and order. The temple's head monk gave an eloquent discourse on the nature of purity and spiritual attainment. After the formal teaching, the disciples gathered eagerly around their master in a quiet corner of the temple grounds. They were inspired by everything they'd seen and heard. "Master," one asked with shining eyes, "isn't this magnificent? Such dedication to practice, such perfect forms. Surely this is what our training should aspire to, this purity, this beauty, this separation from the world's defilement. Is this not the true path to enlightenment?" The old master listened to their enthusiasm without expression. Then, without a word, he rose and led them back outside the temple gates. The disciples followed, puzzled. He walked down the hillside to where their muddy path continued its winding way, stopping at a particularly dirty stretch where the rain had carved deep ruts and puddles reflected the grey sky. There, in the middle of the muddy road, the master knelt. The disciples watched in astonishment as he placed his palm flat in the mud, pressing until his hand was completely covered. Then, with the same hand, he drew a circle in the mire, perfectly round, deliberate, complete. Looking up at his bewildered students, he spoke quietly. "The truth can be found here as well." They stared at the muddy circle, then at their teacher's soiled hand, then back at the gleaming temple above. One young monk ventured, "But Master, surely the temple with its purity and beauty is more conducive to realization than this dirty road." The master's eyes crinkled with something like amusement. "Tell me," he said, "which is closer to the truth? The golden statue that never changes, or this mud that was once mountain, will be ocean, has been tree and animal, and will be again? Which is more honest? The incense that masks the world's scent, or this earth that hides nothing?" He continued, still kneeling in the mud. "In the temple, you sit on clean cushions and think clean thoughts. But what happens when you return to the dirty world? Will your enlightenment survive the mud? Or have you simply learned to avoid what you consider unclean?" Another disciple asked, "Are you saying we shouldn't appreciate the temple's beauty or follow its forms?" "No," the master replied, rising slowly, his knees now muddy along with his hand. "The temple has its place, its teaching, its value. But if you can find truth only in temples, you have found only a partial truth. The whole truth includes this mud, includes your wet robes, includes the blister on your foot and the doubt in your heart." He looked at each of them in turn. "Where can liberation be found? Only in special places, or wherever you stand? Is wisdom reserved for perfect conditions, or does it shine through broken things?" The disciples stood silent in the rain, watching their muddy circle slowly fill with water, becoming a tiny pond that reflected the same grey sky as every other puddle on the path. In that moment, some of them began to understand. The master concluded, "The temple teaches transcendence, rising above the world's mud, but the road teaches immanence, finding the sacred within the mud itself. Both fingers point to the same moon. Don't mistake the pointing for the truth." The Buddha taught, "If you cannot find the truth right where you are, where else do you expect to find it?" This teaching cuts through our tendency to exile the sacred to special locations, to imagine that wisdom requires perfect conditions, that peace demands the absence of disturbance. How often we tell ourselves that we'll find peace when circumstances improve, when the house is quiet, when problems resolve, when we finally create the perfect meditation space. We wait for clean conditions while life offers its muddy road, moment after moment, exactly as it is. Tonight, as you lie here, notice what mud surrounds you. Perhaps your mind feels clouded rather than clear. Maybe your body carries the day's fatigue instead of perfect vitality. Possibly worries track through your awareness like muddy footprints, and you think peace must wait until everything is clean. But what if the master's muddy circle contains a profound invitation? What if the truth you seek doesn't require ideal conditions? What if rest can bloom in the middle of your imperfect moment, just as lotus flowers root in mud while opening to sky? The temple and the road both offer teachings, but the road's teaching is always available. You don't need to climb any mountain or achieve any special state. Right here, in whatever mental or emotional weather you find yourself, wisdom waits patiently. That restless thought churning through your mind, can you see it as part of the path rather than an obstacle to peace? This imperfect body with its aches and tensions, might it be as sacred as any temple statue? The ordinary darkness of your room, could it hold as much potential for awakening as any golden shrine? The master's hand pressed into mud reminds us that enlightenment includes everything, excludes nothing. It's not found by rejecting the messy parts of experience, but by recognizing their place in the whole. The mud and the temple are one teaching, one truth, one reality, expressing itself in countless forms. Let tonight's rest be a muddy circle, perfectly imperfect, including whatever arises, excluding nothing. You don't need to clean your mind before sleeping. You don't need to achieve some pure state before peace becomes possible. Right here, in the middle of your beautifully muddy human experience, draw the circle of acceptance. The rain falls on temples and roads alike. Truth shines through golden statues and dirty puddles equally. And rest comes not from finding perfect conditions, but from recognizing that this moment, exactly as it is, lacks nothing. The Master knew. Sometimes the deepest teaching comes not from climbing toward purity, but from kneeling in the mud and recognizing you never left holy ground. Our next story reveals how quickly we create our own heaven and hell through the choices of each moment. This is the story of the samurai and the gates. In the days when samurai walked the lands of Japan, their curved swords symbols of honor and death, there lived a warrior named Takeda. He had served his lord faithfully through countless battles, his blade swift as lightning, his courage unshakable. Yet as the years passed and the wars ended, questions began to trouble his warrior's heart. What meaning lay beyond the way of the sword? What became of warriors after death? Those who had killed in service, who had lived by the code of steel. The priests spoke of heavenly realms and hellish depths, but their words felt distant from the brutal realities he had known. Unable to quiet these questions through meditation or martial practice, Takeda heard of a Zen master living in a remote mountain temple. This teacher, it was said, could answer any spiritual question with piercing clarity. Though the journey was long and his pride resisted seeking help, the samurai's need for understanding finally overcame his hesitation. After days of hard travel, Takeda arrived at the simple temple. The master who greeted him was everything a warrior was not: small, elderly, thin as a reed that bends with every breeze. The samurai, in his armor and twin swords, towered over this frail monk like a mountain over a pebble. Fighting his instinct to show superiority, Takeda bowed stiffly and stated his purpose. "Master, I am Takeda, samurai of the Yamamoto clan. I have taken many lives in honorable combat and lived always by the warrior code. I have come seeking knowledge of the eternal realms. Tell me, what is heaven? What is hell? Where does a warrior go after death?" The old master looked up at him, eyes twinkling with something unreadable. Then his expression shifted to one of utter contempt. "You," he said, voice dripping with disdain. "You want to know about heaven and hell? Look at you, nothing but a brute in metal clothes. Your face is stupid as an ox, your manner crude as a peasant's. What lord would employ such a graceless fool? You probably can't even use those pretty swords properly. Run along, soldier boy. Stop wasting my time with questions too deep for your shallow mind." Takeda's face flushed crimson. His body went rigid with shock, then trembled with rising fury. No one had ever dared speak to him with such disrespect. He was samurai. He had earned honor through blood and discipline. This withered old monk dared mock him. "How dare you!" he roared, hand flying to his katana's hilt. In one fluid motion born of years of practice, he drew the blade. Steel sang its death song as it cleared the scabbard. He raised the sword high, muscles coiled to strike down this insulting fool. One cut would silence the mockery forever. At that precise instant, sword at its apex, rage at its peak, the moment balanced on the edge between restraint and murder, the master looked calmly into Takeda's burning eyes. "That," he said softly, "is the gate of hell." The words hit Takeda like ice water. Time seemed to stop. In that frozen moment, he saw himself with shocking clarity, face twisted with rage, sword raised to kill an unarmed old man who had done nothing but speak words. He saw how quickly pride had become wrath, how easily offense had become violence, how a few sounds from a stranger's mouth had transformed him into a demon. The recognition was devastating. This was hell, not some distant realm of punishment, but this very moment of blind fury, this prison of reactive rage he had locked himself within. He stood at hell's gate, one choice away from entering fully. Slowly, as if moving through thick mud, Takeda lowered his sword. The rage drained from his body, replaced by profound shame, and then, surprisingly, gratitude. This teacher had risked his life to show Takeda a truth no scripture could convey. With trembling hands, the samurai sheathed his blade. Then he did something that would have been unthinkable moments before. This proud warrior, who bowed fully to no one but his lord, dropped to his knees before the small monk. He pressed his forehead to the ground in deepest prostration, tears of recognition and gratitude flowing freely. "Forgive me, Master," he whispered. "I understand. You showed me hell by helping me create it. Thank you for this teaching. Thank you for this gift." The Master's expression transformed, contempt melting into boundless compassion. He reached out and gently touched the warrior's bowed head. "And that," he said, voice warm as spring sunshine, "is the gate of paradise." Again, Takeda felt the shock of recognition, but this time it carried joy instead of shame. Paradise wasn't a reward for good behavior or a distant place for the worthy dead. It was here, now, in this moment of humility, understanding, and open-hearted gratitude. The same room that had been hell moments ago was now heaven. Nothing had changed but his own mind. The samurai remained kneeling, but now in wonder rather than shame. In the space of a few heartbeats, he had traveled from his ordinary consciousness through the burning landscape of hell to the cooling grace of paradise. The journey had required no movement through space, no passage of years, only the shifting of his own mental states. The Buddha taught, "We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world." The samurai's journey reveals this teaching in its most immediate form, how quickly we create suffering or liberation through our mental reactions. Consider how many times today you've stood at similar gates. The driver who cut you off in traffic. Did you choose the hell of rage or the paradise of patience? The criticism that stung your pride. Did it open hell's furnace or paradise's understanding? Each interaction, each arising thought, each moment of choice presents the same two gates. Tonight, as you rest here, notice which gates you're choosing. When a worried thought arises, do you follow it into anxiety's hell or meet it with acceptance's paradise? When discomfort appears in your body, Do you resist and create suffering's inferno, or soften and find peace's garden? The Master's profound gift was showing that these realms aren't distant destinations, but present choices. We don't wait until death to enter heaven or hell. We create them breath by breath through our responses to what life offers. Feel how even now, in this quiet moment, both gates stand open. You could fill this time with judgments about the day, regrets about the past, fears about tomorrow, instant hell, self-created and self-maintained. Or you could choose gratitude for this moment of rest, compassion for your tired body and busy mind, appreciation for another day lived, instant paradise, equally available. The samurai learned that his sword could cut both ways, toward destruction, or when sheathed with wisdom, toward liberation. Your thoughts carry the same power. Each one can slash toward suffering, or, when recognized and released with awareness, create space for peace. Notice how quickly states shift, how fluid the boundaries between suffering and peace. The same awareness that recognizes hell's heat can choose paradise's coolness. The same mind that creates one can create the other. This is both the terror and the promise of human consciousness. We are free to choose our realm in each moment. Let tonight's rest be a conscious choosing of paradise's gate, not through forcing or fighting, but through the samurai's second response, releasing the sword, bowing to what is, opening to gratitude even for difficult teachers. In that releasing, that humility, that recognition, paradise opens naturally. The Master touched the warrior's head with infinite gentleness, the same hand that had risked striking to awaken him. This is how life touches us, sometimes harsh to wake us, sometimes tender to heal us, always offering the next chance to choose our gate. Rest now at paradise's threshold. The gate stands open. Enter with each released breath, each softened muscle, each thought met with kindness rather than the sword. Heaven isn't waiting somewhere else. Like the samurai discovered, it's one choice away. The choice to put down our weapons and bow to the present moment's perfect teaching. Let us now explore a story about finding our own unique path among the many ways that lead to awakening. This is the story of choosing the right boat. By the banks of a wide river, where morning mist rose like incense from the water, a young seeker arrived at a monastery famous for its wise masters. He carried with him a burden heavier than his traveling pack, the weight of confusion about which spiritual path to follow. For years, he had wandered from teacher to teacher, tradition to tradition. He had studied yoga in the mountains, practiced vipassana in forest monasteries, learned tantric methods in temples, explored Zen koans in meditation halls. Each path claimed to be complete, each teacher sincere, each method proven by centuries of practitioners. Yet their approaches often seemed to contradict one another. The monastery's elder, a woman whose eyes held depths of knowing, greeted him at the gate. After he had rested and taken tea, she invited him to share what brought him to their door. "Master," he began, fatigue evident in his voice, "I am lost in a forest of teachings. The yoga masters tell me to perfect postures and control breath. The vipassana teachers say to simply observe what arises. The tantric path involves elaborate visualizations, while Zen strips everything away. Some say effort is essential, others insist effort itself is the obstacle. How can they all be right? how do I know I'm not wasting precious years on the wrong path? The master listened with full attention, nodding slowly. When he finished, she said simply, "Come, let me show you something." She led him down to the riverbank where the monastery kept its boats. There, bobbing gently in the current, was an astonishing variety of vessels. Sleek fishing boats with nets and poles, broad cargo boats built for heavy loads, swift, narrow kayaks that could dance through rapids, steady rowboats worn smooth by years of use, elegant sailboats with wings of white canvas. "Tell me," the master said, gesturing to the collection, "which is the right boat?" The seeker looked puzzled. "The right boat for what purpose, master?" "Precisely," she smiled. "Now you begin to understand. Look, the fisherman's boat would be useless for carrying grain. The cargo vessel would capsize in rapids where the kayak thrives. The sailboat needs wind while the rowboat moves by human power alone. Is any boat wrong? Or does each serve its purpose according to design and conditions?" "I see each has its place," the young man replied slowly. "But master, choosing a boat for crossing a river seems simpler than choosing a path to enlightenment." The master picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water. "All these vessels, despite their different designs, share one purpose: to cross water without sinking. All genuine spiritual paths, despite their different methods, share one aim: to carry us from suffering to liberation, from sleep to awakening." She continued, "The question isn't which boat is universally right, but which boat suits your journey. What waters must you cross? Some souls need the structure of elaborate practice, others the simplicity of just sitting. Some hearts open through devotion, others through inquiry. Some require community support like a large vessel, others must make the crossing alone in a single-person craft." "But how do I know which boat is mine?" the seeker pressed. The master looked at him with compassion. "Tell me, when you've practiced these various paths, which ones made you feel most alive? Not just challenged or impressed, but deeply at home? In which practices did you lose yourself so completely that the question of right or wrong disappeared?" The young man reflected. "In silent sitting, master. When I simply sat without technique or goal, something settled in me. But I worried it was too simple, that I should be doing something more elaborate." "Ah," said the master. "As the great teacher Suzuki Roshi once said, the most important thing is to find out what is the most important thing. You've been so busy comparing boats that you forgot to notice which one your feet naturally walked toward." She pointed to a simple wooden boat, unadorned but solid. "Some need the ornate vessel with golden trim. Others find truth in plain wood that keeps nothing between them and the water. The boat that calls to your deepest nature, that is your right boat." "But what if I choose wrongly?" "Then you'll get wet," the master laughed, "and you'll swim to shore and choose again. The river is patient. It doesn't care which boat you use, only that you have the courage to push off from the bank. As we say here, better to cross in a leaky boat than to stand on the shore debating perfection." She turned to face him fully. Each boat here could tell stories of successful crossings. The fisherman's boat has carried monks to the other shore. The cargo vessel has borne teachers to wisdom. What matters isn't the style of boat, but the sincerity of the crossing. Then all paths truly lead to the same place. All genuine paths lead from suffering toward freedom, she clarified. But notice, I said genuine. A boat with hidden holes, no matter how beautiful, won't serve. A teaching that increases ego, encourages harm, or deepens delusion. This is not a boat, but an anchor. You must use both heart and wisdom in choosing. As the sun began to set, painting the river gold, the master offered one final teaching. Here's the secret many miss. The boat is not the destination. It's a vehicle for crossing. Don't fall so in love with your boat that you forget to disembark on the other shore. And don't spend so long comparing boats that you never begin the journey. The young seeker bowed deeply. He understood now that his searching had been another form of postponement, a way to avoid committing to the crossing itself. The perfect path was the one that got him moving, not the one that looked best from shore. The Buddha taught, there are only two mistakes one can make along the road to truth: not going all the way and not starting. This seeker had been caught in the second mistake, paralyzed by too many options, waiting for certainty that could only come from experience. Tonight, as you rest here, consider what boats you've been comparing instead of boarding. Perhaps you've wondered if you should meditate differently, breathe differently, approach sleep differently. The mind loves to create elaborate comparisons, convincing us that peace awaits in some other method than the simple one at hand. But what if your boat is already beneath you? What if the simple act of lying here, breathing naturally, letting go thought by thought? What if this is your perfect vessel for tonight's crossing into rest? Suzuki Roshi also taught, you are perfect as you are, and you could use a little improvement. Both truths hold. Your current approach to rest is sufficient, and it can deepen with practice. The boat you have is enough to begin, even as you learn to navigate more skillfully. Notice how the comparing mind wants to evaluate even now. Is this the right story, the best position, the optimal breathing pattern? See how exhausting it becomes, this endless assessment of boats, while the river of rest flows on, ready to carry you across. Choose your boat by what feels most natural, most honest to your tired body and settling mind. Perhaps it's counting breaths. Perhaps it's feeling the weight of your limbs. Perhaps it's simply being present with whatever arises. The right boat is the one that's moving, not the one that looks perfect from shore. Let go of the spiritual materialism that insists on the fanciest vessel. Release the fear that chooses the safest looking craft. Trust the boat that your deepest wisdom has already chosen. This simple moment, this gentle awareness, this willingness to stop comparing and start crossing. The river doesn't care which boat you use. It only asks that you trust the water to carry you. Rest doesn't mind which technique brought you here. It only wants to welcome you to the other shore, where all boats are left behind and only peace remains. Push off now from the bank of comparison. Let the current of natural tiredness carry you. Your boat, whether simple or elaborate, traditional or unique, is already perfect for this crossing. All that remains is to trust the journey and let the river do what rivers have always done. Carry sincere travelers home. Our next story explores the journey from intellectual understanding to direct realization, from knowing about truth to becoming it. This is the story of the sound of one hand. In the Rinzai school of Zen, where enlightenment was pursued with fierce determination, there lived Master Hakuin. His teaching methods were as sharp as winter wind, designed to cut through the comfortable concepts students wrapped around themselves like warm cloaks. Among his many innovations was a simple question that would echo through centuries. What is the sound of one hand? To Hakuin's monastery came a brilliant young monk named Koji. He had memorized vast portions of the Buddhist canon, could debate the subtlest points of doctrine, and took pride in his quick mind that sliced through philosophical problems like a keen blade through silk. When Hakuin assigned him the koan of one hand's sound, Koji felt confident he would penetrate its meaning swiftly. That first night, Koji sat in meditation, turning the question over in his mind like a jewel, examining each facet. Two hands clapping make a sound. This was obvious. But one hand? The answer must be metaphorical, pointing to some deeper truth about non-duality or emptiness. After 3 days of intense contemplation, he approached Hakuin for dokusan, the private interview where students present their understanding. "Master," Koji said, barely containing his excitement, "I have penetrated the koan. The sound of one hand is silence, the pregnant void from which all sounds arise and to which they return." Hakuin's expression remained neutral as stone. "Number continue." Koji bowed and returned to the meditation hall, somewhat deflated but not discouraged. His first answer had been too obvious. The master wanted something deeper. A week passed. Koji's sitting intensified. He analyzed the question from every angle his scholarly mind could conceive. Finally, a new insight arose. "Master, the sound of one hand is the sound of the universe itself, the cosmic Om that reverberates through all existence, requiring no second hand because it is complete in itself. Number continue." As weeks turned to months, Koji's answers grew more elaborate and desperate. The sound of one hand was the cry of the unborn bird. It was the teacher's staff striking the floor. It was the wind through pine needles, requiring no partner to create its song. Each time, number continue. Gradually, something began to shift in Koji. His encyclopedic knowledge, once a source of pride, now felt like a prison. Every concept he had studied became another bar preventing direct contact with the living question. As Dogen Zenji had written, "Before one studies Zen, mountains are mountains and waters are waters. After a first glimpse into the truth of Zen, mountains are no longer mountains and waters are no longer waters. After enlightenment, mountains are once again mountains and waters once again waters." Koji found himself in that middle territory where nothing was what it seemed. The question, "What is the sound of one hand?" began to permeate his entire existence. He heard it in his heartbeat, felt it in his breath, tasted it in his rice. It was no longer a riddle to be solved, but a living presence that accompanied him everywhere. One night, exhausted from striving, Koji gave up. Not in defeat, but in a profound surrender. His mind, worn out from generating answers, finally fell silent. He sat in the meditation hall as rain began pattering on the roof, and for the first time, he wasn't trying to understand anything. In that moment of complete letting go, something extraordinary happened. The boundary between Koji and the question dissolved. He didn't have an answer. He became the answer. The sound of one hand wasn't something to figure out, but a direct pointing to the very awareness reading these words, hearing these sounds, present before all division into one or two or many. When the bell rang for Dokusan, Koji walked to Hakuin's room with empty hands and an empty mind. He bowed and sat before the master. "What is the sound of one hand?" Hakuin asked. Without hesitation, without thought, Koji responded, not with words or clever demonstrations, but with his entire being. The response arose from a place before language, before concepts, before the division of self and other. Hakuin's weathered face broke into a rare smile. "Now you hear it," he said simply. "Now you are it." Later, Koji tried to explain the experience to a fellow monk. "I had been trying to understand the sound from outside, as if I were separate from it. But the sound of one hand is the most intimate thing. It's the aware presence that exists before we divide the world into pairs of opposites. It's what remains when the comparing mind falls silent." His friend pressed for more details. What exactly did he do? What was the right answer? Koji could only shake his head. Asking for the right answer is like asking for the right way to be yourself. As Master Yunmen said, when you can't say it, it's there. When you don't speak, it's manifest. The moment I try to explain it, I've lost it. The moment I grasp it as an object, it's no longer the living truth. The Buddha taught, "The Dharma that I have realized is profound, hard to see, hard to understand, beyond the sphere of mere reasoning." Koji had discovered why. Truth isn't a concept to be grasped, but a reality to be lived. Not a sound to be heard, but a silence to become. Tonight, as you rest in the darkness, you might notice your own mind trying to figure things out. What is the sound of perfect sleep? What is the right way to find rest? How should breathing feel when you're truly relaxed? The thinking mind generates answer after answer, like Koji presenting his concepts to Hakuin. But what if rest, like the sound of one hand, isn't something to understand? What if it's already present in the very awareness that wonders about it? Before you think about sleep, something in you already knows how to sleep. Before you try to relax, something in you is already at peace. Master Yunmen's words echo through the centuries. When you can't say it, it's there. The deepest rest comes not from following instructions, but from recognizing what needs no instruction. The profound sleep arrives not through effort, but through remembering what you knew before you learned to try. Feel how the question, "How do I rest?" creates a subtle tension, a division between you and rest. But when that question falls away, when the one trying to sleep and sleep itself merge into one movement, then the sound of one hand rings clear, not as something you hear, but as something you are. Like Koji sitting in that meditation hall, worn out from seeking, you can discover that the deepest teachings come through exhaustion of the seeking itself. When the mind that wants to figure everything out finally rests, what remains? When the hand of effort stops clapping against the hand of goal, what sound continues? This is the gift of impossible questions. They exhaust the part of us that believes everything can be solved through thinking. In that exhaustion, a different kind of knowing emerges, immediate and intimate as your own heartbeat. Let tonight's rest be like Koji's final answer. not something you achieve through cleverness, but something you become through surrender. The sound of one hand is ringing now in the silence between thoughts, in the space between breaths, in the awareness that reads these words without effort. Stop trying to hear it. You are it. Stop trying to find rest. You are resting yourself, dreaming you're separate, and playing the game of seeking what you've never lost. When this recognition dawns, even for a moment, the ancient koan resolves itself. The sound of one hand is the simplest thing in the world. It's the sound of coming home to what you've always been. Let us now explore a story about the universal nature of loss and how understanding our shared humanity can transform our deepest grief. This is the parable of the mustard seed. In the time when the Buddha walked the dusty roads of India, teaching all who would listen, there lived a young woman named Kisa Gotami in the city of Savatthi. She had married into a good family and been blessed with a beloved son who brought light to her days like the morning sun breaking through monsoon clouds. His laughter filled their modest home. His small hand in hers made every journey an adventure. But in this world of impermanence, sorrow often follows joy. When her son was old enough to run and play with other children, a sudden illness seized him. Despite all efforts, the herbs, the prayers, the sleepless nights of care, the child's life slipped away like water through cupped hands. Kisa Gotami held his still form against her heart, and something inside her shattered into pieces too numerous to count. But grief can make us refuse what the mind cannot accept. Kisa Gotami could not acknowledge her son's death. She carried his small body through the streets, knocking on every door, entering every shop, approaching anyone who would pause long enough to listen. "Please," she begged, her eyes wild with desperate hope. "My child is sick. Do you have medicine? Someone must have medicine to cure him. He only needs the right medicine, and he'll wake up. He'll smile again. Please, help me find the cure." Most people turned away in discomfort, recognizing death's finality where she saw only temporary illness. Some spoke harsh words, telling her to accept reality. Others, moved by compassion for her obvious distress, could only shake their heads sadly. But Kisa Gotami continued, her son's body growing lighter in her arms with each passing hour, though her heart grew only heavier. Finally, a wise merchant who had heard the Buddha's teachings took pity on her. "Sister," he said gently, "I cannot help you, but there is one who might. Go to the Buddha. He is staying in the Jetavana Grove. If anyone has medicine for your child, it would be him." Hope blazed anew in Kisa Gotami's heart. Clutching her son, she ran to the grove where the Buddha sat teaching beneath the shade of ancient trees. The crowd parted before her urgency, and she fell at the Blessed One's feet. "Lord," she cried, "they say you have wisdom and power beyond ordinary beings. Please, I beg you, give me medicine for my son. He is all I have. Without him, I cannot live. Save him, and I will serve you all my days." The Buddha looked upon her with eyes that held infinite compassion, seeing not just her present anguish, but the depths of human suffering she represented. He spoke softly, his voice carrying both gentleness and unwavering clarity. "I can help you, Kisa Gotami. There is indeed a medicine, but you must bring me something first, a single mustard seed." Her face lit with desperate joy. "Yes, yes, Lord, I will bring it immediately," Wait, the Buddha continued. This mustard seed must come from a house where no one has died, no parent, no child, no servant. Find such a house, bring me the seed, and I will cure your son. Kisa Gotami bowed hastily and rushed back to the city, her son still in her arms but her heart now carrying hope. A mustard seed, such a simple thing. Surely in this great city, there must be at least one house that death had not visited. At the first house, a kind woman answered her knock. Of course, sister, I have mustard seeds. Take as many as you need. Wait, Kisa Gotami said. I must ask, has anyone died in this house? The woman's face softened with sad memory. My husband passed 2 years ago. Why do you ask? Without explaining, Kisa Gotami moved to the next house. An elderly man offered seeds gladly, but when asked, he spoke of losing his son in war. The next house had mourned a grandmother. The next, a baby who never saw her first birthday. House after house, street after street, the story repeated with variations. Death had visited them all, recently or long ago, suddenly or slowly, taking the old who were ready and the young who were not. Rich mansions and poor huts alike had known loss. No threshold remained uncrossed by grief. As the sun traced its arc across the sky, something began to shift in Kisa Gotami. With each story of loss she heard, her own grief, while not diminishing, began to find context. She was not alone in her sorrow. She was not singled out by cruel fate. She was part of an infinite community of hearts that had broken and somehow continued beating. By evening, she had visited hundreds of homes. Her arms ached, not just from carrying her son, but from the weight of all the sorrows she had witnessed. Yet paradoxically, this shared burden felt lighter than her isolated anguish had been. As Ajahn Chah wisely said, if you let go a little, you will have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you will have a lot of peace. If you let go completely, you will have complete peace. Standing at the edge of the city as darkness fell, Kisa Gotami finally understood. The Buddha had not sent her to find a magical cure, but to discover a fundamental truth. Death was not her personal curse, but the universal destiny of all that lives. To be born is to be marked for death. To love is to eventually lose. This was not cruelty, but simply the nature of existence. With infinite tenderness, she laid her son's body down at last. She performed the proper rites, said the prayers, and allowed the earth to receive what had always belonged to it. Her tears fell freely, no longer the wild tears of denial, but the cleansing tears of acceptance. When she returned to the Buddha, her hands were empty of mustard seeds, but her heart was full of understanding. She bowed deeply. Lord, I could not find a house untouched by death. I understand now what you wanted me to see. The Buddha nodded. What have you learned, Kisa Gotami? That I am not alone in my suffering. That grief has visited every home, every heart. That my pain, while real and deep, is not unique, but part of the shared human experience. Death is not a punishment, but a truth we must all face. And knowing this, the Buddha asked gently, what will you do? I will learn to live with loss without being destroyed by it. I will remember that all who are born must die, and so cherish the moments we have. I will seek the deathless, that which does not die because it was never born. From that day forward, Kisa Gotami became one of the Buddha's most devoted followers, eventually attaining great wisdom. Her story became a teaching for all who found themselves drowning in grief's ocean, a reminder that we swim not alone, but in the company of all humanity. The Buddha taught, "Of all footprints, that of the elephant is supreme. Similarly, of all meditative themes, that on death is supreme. Not because death is morbid to contemplate, but because acknowledging impermanence fully allows us to live and love fully." Tonight, as you rest in the darkness that reminds us of life's great mystery, consider what houses you have visited in your own life. What losses have you carried like Kisa Gotami carried her child, unwilling to set them down? What griefs have isolated you, made you feel singled out by sorrow? Remember that in this very moment, countless others lie awake with their own losses. A parent gone, a love ended, a dream shattered, a future changed. You are not alone in the dark. The whole human family shares this night with you, each heart carrying its mustard seed of sorrow. But see too how Kisa Gotami's story transforms grief's poison into medicine. Not by denying loss or rushing past it, but by recognizing it as the price of having loved at all. As another teacher said, grief is love with no place to go. In accepting the universality of loss, we find strange comfort. Not that others suffer, but that suffering connects us all in the deepest web of compassion. Let each breath tonight be a gentle acknowledgement. Breathing in, I know that all things pass. Breathing out, I release my grip on what cannot be held. Breathing in, I am not alone in loss. Breathing out, I join the human family. Breathing in, I have loved. Breathing out, I let love teach me to release. The mustard seed the Buddha really offered was not denial of death, but acceptance of life in its fullness, joy and sorrow, meeting and parting, birth and death, dancing together in the great mandala of existence. When we stop demanding that life offer only half its teaching, we find a peace that includes both laughter and tears. Rest now in that fuller understanding. You need not carry your losses alone, nor deny them to find peace. Like Kisa Gotami, you can set down what has died while keeping alive the love that does not die. In this release lies the beginning of healing. In this acceptance lies the seed of peace. The empty hands that could not bring back a mustard seed became the open hands that could receive wisdom. May your own empty hands tonight, having released their grip on what cannot be changed, open to receive the rest that comes when we stop fighting the truth of things as they are. Our next story illuminates the difference between following the letter of the law and understanding its spirit. This is the story of two monks at the marketplace. Brothers Tanzan and Aikido were traveling together to a distant monastery, their journey taking them through villages and towns they rarely visited in their secluded mountain practice. Both were dedicated monks who had taken the same vows, studied under the same master, and wore the same simple robes. Yet their understanding of the monastic path could not have been more different. Aikido was known for his strict adherence to every rule. He counted his steps to ensure equal numbers, measured his rice portions precisely, and could recite the 227 precepts without missing a syllable. His robe never showed a wrinkle, his bowl gleamed from careful cleaning, and he took pride in never having broken even the smallest regulation in his 10 years of practice. Tanzan, older by several years, moved through life with a different quality. His practice seemed effortless, like water finding its natural course. While respectful of the precepts, he appeared more concerned with their purpose than their precise execution. This difference in approach often left Aikido feeling both superior and strangely unsettled in his brother's presence. On this particular day, their path led through a busy market town during festival season. The streets overflowed with merchants hawking wares, children darting between carts, and townspeople in their brightest clothes. For Aikido, navigating this chaos while maintaining monastic dignity required intense concentration. He kept his eyes downcast, counting breaths to avoid being swept into the worldly energy surrounding them. As they reached the market's center, they encountered an unexpected scene. A young woman in an elaborate silk kimono stood at the edge of a large muddy puddle that stretched across the entire street. The recent rains had turned this intersection into a small pond, and her delicate golden sandals were clearly unsuited for wading through the mire. She looked distressed, glancing around for help, but finding only busy merchants and indifferent passers-by. Aikido immediately averted his gaze. The precepts were clear. Monks should avoid unnecessary contact with women, especially young and beautiful ones. Such interactions could lead to attachment, desire, and the breaking of celibacy vows. He prepared to walk around the scene, maintaining proper monastic distance. But Tanzan paused. He observed the situation with clear eyes, a fellow human being faced with a simple problem. Without hesitation, he approached the young woman. "Please allow me to help," he said gently. Before she could respond, he lifted her carefully in his arms, carried her across the muddy expanse, and set her down safely on the other side. She bowed deeply in gratitude, her distress transformed to relief, and continued on her way. Aikido watched in shocked silence. His mind raced with violations, touching a woman, carrying her in his arms, acting impulsively without consideration of the rules. How could Tanzan, a senior monk, behave so carelessly? Yet he said nothing, maintaining his silence as they continued their journey. But silence did not mean peace. As they walked, Aikido's mind churned like a storm-tossed sea. He mentally composed the report he would make to their abbot. He rehearsed the scriptural passages that condemned such behavior. He wondered if Tanzan's lapse indicated deeper corruptions in his practice. The incident grew larger with each passing mile, transforming from a momentary action into a catastrophic breach of monastic discipline. 3 hours passed. The market town lay far behind them, and they walked now through quiet bamboo groves. Still, Aikido could not contain himself any longer. "Brother Tanzan," he burst out, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "How could you do that? We have taken vows. We are forbidden from touching women. What you did back there was completely against our precepts. How can you call yourself a monk after such behavior?" Tanzan stopped walking and turned to face his agitated companion. His expression held no defensiveness, only gentle curiosity. After a moment, he spoke with the same calm simplicity that had carried the woman across the mud. "Brother Aikido," he said, "I put that woman down hours ago at the market. Are you still carrying her?" The words struck Aikido like a temple bell, reverberating through his entire being. In one simple question, Tanzan had revealed the profound difference between external observance and internal freedom. While Aikido had kept his body pure by avoiding contact, his mind had been defiled for hours by judgment, anger, and self-righteousness. While Tanzan had briefly carried a woman's physical form, Aikido had carried the mental burden of the incident, growing heavier with each step. As the Zen master Linji taught, in Buddhism, there is no place for using effort. Just be ordinary and nothing special. Eat when hungry, sleep when tired. Ignorant people will laugh at me, but the wise will understand. Aikido stood speechless, recognizing how his rigid interpretation of the rules had created more suffering than Tanzan's compassionate violation of them. The precepts were meant to lead to liberation, not to become chains. They were designed to reduce attachment, not to prevent kindness. In his zealous protection of the rules, he had missed their very purpose, the cultivation of a free and compassionate heart. Tanzan placed a gentle hand on his brother's shoulder. The precepts are like a raft to cross the river of suffering. But once across, do we carry the raft on our backs forever? The woman needed help. In that moment, compassion was the highest precept. I touched her body for a few seconds to help her. You've been touching her with your thoughts for hours to judge me. Which of us has been more intimate with her? The Buddha taught, all things arise and pass away, but the awakened one is forever free of attachment. This freedom doesn't mean disregarding wisdom or acting carelessly, but rather responding to each moment with fresh awareness rather than rigid programming. Tonight, as you lie here preparing for rest, notice what you might still be carrying from earlier today. Perhaps someone's careless words that you've been rehearsing and amplifying. Maybe a mistake you made that you've been replaying with harsh judgment. Or rules about how sleep should come that create tension rather than ease. Like Aikido, we often carry mental burdens far longer than necessary, turning momentary experiences into lasting suffering through our inability to put them down. We follow rules about what we should think, how we should feel, when we should sleep, creating internal monasteries with walls higher than any temples. But what if, like Tanzan, you could set down what you've been carrying? What if the rules you've created about perfect rest are actually preventing the very peace they're meant to protect? Sometimes the most sacred act is the simplest, helping someone across the mud, then continuing on unburdened. Feel the weight of today's accumulated thoughts and judgments. Notice how heavy they've become through being carried unnecessarily. And now, with Tanzan's gentle question echoing through time, consider, what are you still carrying that could be put down? Each exhale can be a small act of setting down. Each release of breath, a letting go of what no longer serves. You carried today's experiences for as long as was needed. Now, at the threshold of sleep, you can place them gently by the roadside and continue on lighter. The monk's story reminds us that true practice isn't about perfect adherence to form, but about understanding the spirit that gives form meaning. Rest doesn't come from following sleep rules perfectly, but from releasing the very effort of following rules. Peace arrives not through mental purity, but through the simple willingness to put down our burdens. Tanzan carried a woman across muddy water and set her down. Aikido carried an idea across miles of road and couldn't release it. Which burden was heavier? Which monk was freer? In the gentle darkness of this moment, you have the same choice: to carry or to release, to judge or to rest, to cling to the day or to set it down with the same easy grace that Tanzan showed at the market. The woman reached the other side and continued her journey. May you reach the other side of today and continue into sleep, carrying nothing unnecessary, free as a monk who understands that compassion is the highest precept and release the deepest practice. Let us now explore a story about finding joy without reason, peace without cause. This is the story of the Laughing Hermit. Deep in the forests of ancient China, where mist clung to pine branches and streams sang their way down mountain slopes, there lived a hermit unlike any other. Travelers who passed through those remote paths would sometimes hear it echoing through the trees. Laughter. Pure, uninhibited laughter that seemed to bubble up from the earth itself, carrying neither mockery nor madness, but something altogether more mysterious. The local villagers called him the Laughing Hermit, though none knew his real name or origins. He had appeared one spring, taking residence in a small cave halfway up the mountain. Unlike other hermits who sought these heights for severe practice and grim austerity, this one seemed to do nothing but laugh. Morning would find him laughing at the sunrise. Evening would leave him chuckling at the stars. Even in sleep, witnesses reported, soft giggles would drift from his cave like incense. A young scholar named Wei, proud of his learning and serious about spiritual matters, heard these tales with great skepticism. Surely this was no true sage but a madman, or worse, a charlatan, mocking the sincere seekers who pursued wisdom through discipline and study. He decided to climb the mountain and expose this so-called hermit. After a difficult ascent, Wei found the cave exactly where villagers had described. And there, sitting on a flat stone at the entrance, was an elderly man with eyes that sparkled like mountain springs. His face bore the lines of age, but seemed lit from within by some inexhaustible candle. As Wei approached, the hermit looked up and immediately burst into delighted laughter. "Why do you laugh?" Wei demanded, irritated by this greeting. "I haven't said anything amusing. Is this how you greet all visitors?" The hermit's laughter gradually subsided to a warm chuckle. He wiped tears of mirth from his eyes and regarded Wei with genuine affection, as if greeting a long-lost friend. "I laugh because the sun is shining," the hermit said simply. Wei frowned. "But the sun shines every day. What's funny about that?" "Exactly," the hermit exclaimed, and fell into fresh peals of laughter. Growing frustrated, Wei pressed on. "Master, if you are indeed a master, I've come seeking wisdom. They say you're enlightened, but all I see is someone who laughs without reason. What teaching can you offer? What practices do you follow? What scriptures do you study?" The hermit's eyes twinkled with even greater amusement. "My practice? I laugh. My scripture? Ha ha ha. My teaching? He he he. This is absurd," Wei said coldly. "Genuine masters teach through words of wisdom, through meditation instructions, through pointing out the nature of reality. You offer nothing but meaningless laughter." The hermit nodded enthusiastically, as if Wei had just expressed the most profound truth. Yes, meaningless, without meaning, free from the burden of meaning. and he laughed even harder. As the 14th century Zen master Basui said, "The one who is not attached to anything born in this world of phenomena, and who does not get caught up in the real aspect of the unborn emptiness, is a free person without compare." Wei sat down heavily, his scholarly mind struggling to categorize this encounter. "But surely," he insisted, "there must be a reason for joy. Something causes happiness, achievement, understanding, favorable conditions. You sit in a cave with nothing, yet laugh as if you owned the world." "As if," the hermit giggled, "but I do own the world, and so do you. We own the sun that rises without payment, the rain that falls without judgment, the breath that comes and goes without effort. What kingdom could compare to this wealth?" "But what about suffering?" Wei challenged. "What about pain, loss, death? Do you laugh at those too?" For the first time, the hermit's laughter softened, though the joy never left his eyes. "Young friend, I laugh not because life contains no pain, but because I've discovered something wonderful. Joy needs no opposite to exist. Happiness requires no reason to be. Suffering comes and goes like clouds. But what watches the clouds? What remains unmoved by the weather?" He continued, "You seek reasons for everything, reasons to be happy, reasons to laugh, reasons to be at peace. But tell me, what is the reason for existence itself? What is the cause of awareness? Some things simply are, prior to reason, beyond cause and effect." Wei found himself caught off guard by the depth hidden within apparent foolishness. "Then your laughter is like birdsong," the hermit completed. "Does the bird sing because it has an audience? Because it hopes to achieve something? Or does song simply pour forth from its nature, requiring no justification?" Days passed. Wei, despite himself, found excuses to extend his stay. He watched the hermit's simple life, gathering wild vegetables, drinking from the stream, watching clouds with the same appreciation others reserved for great art. And always, threading through each activity like a golden thread, came the laughter. It wasn't the laughter of jokes or clever observations. It seemed to well up from some inexhaustible spring, as natural as breathing. Sometimes soft as a whisper, sometimes bold as thunder, but always present, always genuine. One morning, Wei woke to find the hermit laughing at a butterfly that had landed on his nose. Without thinking, Wei found himself chuckling too. The butterfly, the morning light, the absurdity of two grown men giggling at nothing. Suddenly, it all seemed perfectly, impossibly funny. "Ah," said the hermit, eyes bright with recognition. "Now you're beginning to understand. Laughter without reason is freedom. Joy without cause is our true nature. Everything else, all our serious pursuits and grave concerns, these are the additions, the complications. But this," he gestured at their shared mirth, "this is what remains when we stop adding unnecessary weight to life." The Buddha taught, thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. The hermit lived this truth, his joy inexhaustible because it flowed from being itself rather than from circumstances. Tonight, as you rest in the quiet darkness, what if you could touch that same sourceless joy? Not happiness because everything is perfect, but happiness because happiness needs no because. Not laughter at something, but the simple bubbling up of lightness from the depths of being. Notice how the mind immediately wants reasons. I can't be joyful because I'm worried about tomorrow, or I'll be happy when this problem resolves. See how we've trained ourselves to make joy conditional, always postponed until conditions improve. But what does a baby know of conditions when it laughs? What does the hermit understand that Wei's scholarly mind missed? Perhaps that beneath all our reasons and reasoning, there exists a natural state of quiet joy, like an underground stream that never stops flowing, even when the surface appears dry. You don't need to laugh out loud like the hermit, though if gentle laughter comes, let it. Instead, can you touch that place in yourself that needs no reason to be at peace? Can you feel the quiet joy of simply existing, of being aware, of resting here in this moment without requiring it to be different? The hermit owned nothing but possessed everything. He achieved nothing but lacked nothing. His laughter wasn't a practice or a performance, but an overflow of recognition that being itself is cause for quiet celebration. Let each breath be its own reason for contentment. Let each heartbeat be sufficient cause for gratitude. Not because life is easy, but because ease exists beneath the difficulties. Not because problems are solved, but because peace is available even with problems unsolved. The laughing hermit's gift wasn't a teaching, but a reminder that joy is our birthright, available without earning, present without reason. As you drift towards sleep, perhaps you can hear an echo of that ancient laughter, not asking you to understand it, but simply to remember what you knew before you learned to need reasons for peace. In the forest of your own being, there sits a hermit who has never stopped quietly laughing at the simple wonder of awareness itself. Tonight, you're invited to sit with that inner hermit, to rest in the joy that needs no cause, to find the smile that requires no reason. This is the laughter at the heart of silence, not loud, not demanding, just the gentle recognition that being itself is already enough. Our next story reveals how true mastery lies not in skill with weapons, but in the unshakable presence of a peaceful heart. This is the story of the tea master's calm. In Edo period Japan, when samurai still walked the streets with their paired swords and honor meant more than life, there lived a tea master named Yamamoto. He served in the house of a great lord, bringing to the way of tea the same dedication samurai brought to the way of the sword. His movements were poetry, his presence a living meditation. When he performed the tea ceremony, warriors hardened by battle would find their hearts unexpectedly softened, touched by a grace they couldn't name. One spring, the Lord needed to travel to the capital on urgent business. He selected his finest retainers to accompany him, and valuing the comfort of proper tea even on the road, asked Yamamoto to join the party. This required the tea master to dress as a samurai, complete with the 2 swords that marked that class, though he had never drawn a blade in his life. Yamamoto felt uneasy wearing the weapons. They hung at his side like foreign objects, heavy with implications he didn't understand. But duty to his lord came first, so he wore the disguise and tried to carry himself with dignity, focusing on the tea ceremonies he would perform at journey's end. In the capital, while his lord attended to business, Yamamoto was granted permission to visit the famous tea shops of the district. Walking alone through unfamiliar streets, Admiring vessels and tasting rare teas, he momentarily forgot his costume and its dangers. Rounding a corner into a quieter street, he accidentally bumped into a young samurai. It was the lightest contact, barely a brush of sleeves, and Yamamoto immediately bowed in apology. But the samurai, one of those restless warriors who prowled the capital seeking any excuse for combat, saw opportunity. "You dare touch me?" the samurai snarled, hand moving to his sword hilt. "You've insulted my honor." Yamamoto bowed deeper. "My sincere apologies. I was careless. Please forgive my clumsiness." But the samurai, seeing Yamamoto's swords and mistaking him for a fellow warrior, pressed on. "Apologies are insufficient. You wear the twin swords but bow like a merchant. Are you samurai or not? If you are, then face me properly. We'll settle this with steel at dawn tomorrow." Trapped by his disguise, Yamamoto couldn't reveal his true identity without shaming his lord. With a heavy heart, he agreed to the duel, knowing it meant certain death. The samurai named a temple ground outside the city and strode away, satisfied at the prospect of morning bloodshed. Yamamoto stood frozen in the street, watching death approach with tomorrow's sunrise. He had held many things in his life: tea whisks, water ladles, silk cloths, but never a sword in anger. The way of tea taught harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. What did he know of the way of killing? As Zen master Takuan wrote, "The mind must always be in the state of flowing, for when it stops anywhere, that means the flow is interrupted, and it is this interruption that is injurious to the well-being of the mind." Remembering these words, Yamamoto made a decision. If he must die, he would die properly. He sought out a swordmaster's school, explained his predicament, and asked for one lesson: not how to win, but how to die with dignity. The swordmaster, a grizzled veteran of countless duels, studied the tea master carefully. "Show me your art," he commanded. "Perform the tea ceremony as if this were your last teaching." Puzzled but obedient, Yamamoto forgot his fear as he entered the familiar ritual. His hands moved with practiced grace, cleansing the implements, whisking the tea, each gesture flowing from decades of training. In the ceremony's heart, he found the calm center he always touched when serving tea. Death tomorrow? Perhaps. But in this moment, there was only the bowl, the whisk, the perfect temperature of water. The swordmaster watched in amazement. When the ceremony concluded, he spoke with deep respect. "Yamamoto-san, I've seen many warriors, but rarely have I witnessed such perfect presence. Your spirit when making tea, this is the spirit of a master." "But I know nothing of swordsmanship," Yamamoto protested. "You know everything that matters," the swordmaster replied. "Tomorrow, when you face your opponent, don't try to be a swordsman. Be a tea master. Hold your sword as you hold your whisk, with complete attention but no tension. Stand as you stand when serving, fully present, needing nothing. Let your mind rest in the same calm you enter during the ceremony. Your opponent expects to face another swordsman. When he faces the abyss of your calm, he'll be the one who trembles." The next dawn came grey and misty. Yamamoto arrived at the temple grounds to find the samurai already waiting, eager for blood. A small crowd had gathered. Death before breakfast was entertainment in the capital. Yamamoto bowed formally, then prepared himself exactly as the swordmaster instructed. He imagined he was about to perform the tea ceremony for his lord one last time. His breathing deepened and slowed. His mind settled like water in a still bowl. When he drew his sword, it was with the same unhurried grace with which he lifted the tea kettle. He stood in ready position, but his stance held no aggression, no fear, no anticipation. His eyes, usually lowered respectfully during tea service, now gazed at his opponent with the same quality of attention he gave to water reaching the perfect temperature. Complete presence without attachment to outcome. The samurai, expecting fear or fury, found himself facing something far more unsettling: emptiness. Not the emptiness of absence, but the full emptiness of perfect presence. He looked into Yamamoto's eyes and saw no enemy there, no resistance, nothing to push against, like trying to cut water or pierce sky. Minutes passed. The samurai shifted, confused. He was skilled at reading opponents, their fear, their anger, their openings. But this tea master offered nothing to read, no mind to outmaneuver, no emotion to exploit, just an ocean of calm that seemed to swallow his fighting spirit like a pebble dropped in deep water. Sweat beaded on the samurai's forehead, though the morning was cool. His sword tip began to waver. The crowd murmured, sensing something unprecedented, a duel being won without a single strike. Finally, the samurai lowered his blade. "I cannot fight you," he said, voice thick with confusion and something like awe. "I've faced many opponents, but never this. What are you?" "A tea master," Yamamoto replied simply, sheathing his sword with the same care he used storing precious tea vessels. "Nothing more." The samurai bowed deeply. "Then you've taught me that mastery has many faces. Forgive my foolishness." He turned and left, leaving behind his certainty that strength came only through steel. The Buddha taught, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." Yamamoto's presence had spoken more eloquently than any swordplay, teaching through stillness what violence could never convey. Tonight, as you rest here, you might recognize your own version of Yamamoto's challenge. Life presents us with conflicts we feel unequipped to face. Tomorrow's difficult conversation, next week's medical test, the ongoing situation that seems to demand skills we don't possess. We wear our daily disguises, carrying weapons we don't know how to use, facing duels we never sought. But what if, like the tea master, your greatest strength lies not in acquiring new weapons, but in deepening what you already possess? What if the calm you touch in your quietest moments is more powerful than any armor? The swordmaster's advice echoes through time. Don't try to become something you're not. Instead, bring the fullness of what you are to whatever you face. Yamamoto survived not by becoming a warrior, but by being completely, unshakably himself. Feel now how your breathing can become like the tea master's. Not the quick breath of conflict, but the deep rhythm of one who serves peace. Let your body settle into the ground, like Yamamoto standing in the temple garden, needing to prove nothing, defend nothing, become nothing other than what you are. The samurai expected to face fear or aggression, the familiar enemies he knew how to fight. Instead, he met the one force no sword can cut: complete acceptance. Yamamoto's calm became a mirror in which the samurai saw his own unnecessary aggression, and seeing it clearly, he could let it go. Tonight's rest can be your tea ceremony. each breath prepared with the same care Yamamoto brought to whisking tea. Each moment of letting go performed with the attention of one who knows this might be the last serving. Not because danger threatens, but because presence makes every moment both first and last, each one complete in itself. The tea master returned to his lord, sword still clean, having discovered that the deepest teaching of the warrior way and the tea way are one. Be fully present, hold nothing back, meet what comes with your whole being. In that completeness, conflict dissolves not through victory, but through the recognition that there was never anything to fight. Rest now in the tea master's calm. Let tomorrow's challenges wait beyond the horizon. In this moment, there is only the ceremony of breath, the ritual of release, the perfect temperature of now. Your opponents, worry, restlessness, the day's accumulated tensions, cannot fight what offers no resistance. Like the samurai, they lower their swords and depart, leaving you to the peace that was always yours. The way of tea and the way of sleep share this secret. Mastery lies not in doing, but in being. Not in force, but in presence. Not in tomorrow's battle, but in tonight's perfect calm. Our final story tonight speaks to the wisdom found in life's most ordinary moments, where the profound hides in plain sight. This is the story of the student's question. In a mountain monastery where seasons painted the landscape in endless variations, a young monk named Yoshu had been practicing diligently for 3 years. He meditated before dawn, studied the sutras with fierce concentration, and served his community with dedication. Yet despite all his efforts, the great matter of enlightenment remained as distant as the moon reflected in water, visible but impossible to grasp. His teacher, Master Yuantong, was known for his unconventional methods. Where other masters gave elaborate discourses, Yuantong might respond to the deepest questions with silence, a gesture, or seemingly mundane observations about the weather. Students either flourished under his teaching or left in frustration, seeking masters who would feed their hunger for explanations. One autumn morning, as maple leaves turned the mountainside into flames of red and gold, Joshu could contain his frustration no longer. He had just emerged from a particularly difficult meditation session, where his mind had churned like a storm-tossed sea, thoughts crashing against the shores of his awareness despite hours of practice. Finding Master Yuantong in the garden, carefully tending to the late radishes, Joshu approached with determined steps. The master looked up from his work, dirt under his fingernails, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. "Master," Joshu began, his voice tight with suppressed emotion, "I must speak plainly. I've been here 3 years. I've followed every instruction, completed every practice, memorized countless teachings. Yet I feel no closer to understanding them when I arrived. Please, I beg you, what is Buddha? What is this enlightenment we seek? Give me something real, something I can grasp." Yuantong straightened slowly, his back protesting from the morning's labor. He looked at Joshu with eyes that held both compassion and something else, perhaps amusement, perhaps infinite patience. For a long moment, he said nothing, merely observing his student's clenched jaw and rigid posture. Finally, he spoke. "Have you eaten your breakfast?" Joshu blinked, certain he had misheard. "Master?" "Your morning rice," Yuantong repeated gently. Have you eaten it? Yes, Joshu replied, confusion replacing frustration. Yes, I've eaten. Yuantong nodded and returned his attention to the radishes. Then go wash your bowl. As the great master Yunmen once said, when walking, just walk. When sitting, just sit. Above all, don't wobble. But Joshu stood wobbling between expectation and reality, between the profound answer he sought and the simple instruction he'd received. Master, he persisted, I asked about Buddha, about enlightenment, about the ultimate truth, and you tell me to wash my bowl. Yuantong pulled another radish from the earth, shook the soil from its roots. Where else would you like to look for Buddha? In the clouds? In ancient words? In some special state you haven't yet achieved? He held up the radish, its white flesh bright against the dark earth still clinging to it. Tell me, where in this radish is Buddha absent? But Master... Joshu, Yuantong interrupted gently. For 3 years you've been looking over your breakfast bowl for enlightenment. But have you ever truly eaten your rice? Have you washed your bowl with complete attention? Have you met even one moment of your life fully, without wishing it were different? The young monk opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Something in the master's words had found a crack in his certainty. He thought of this morning's breakfast. Had he tasted even 1 grain of rice? Or had he eaten mechanically, his mind already racing toward the meditation hall, the study hall, the imagined moment of breakthrough that never came? You seek Buddha, Yuantong continued, returning to his gardening. Yet you can't even find your breakfast bowl. You want to grasp the ultimate truth, but you've never held your chopsticks with complete awareness. How can you discover the extraordinary when you're blind to the ordinary? Joshu stood silent, watching his teacher's hands move through the garden with the same attention a surgeon might bring to delicate operation. Each movement necessary, nothing wasted, completely present to the task. Master, he said finally, his voice softer now. Are you saying enlightenment is just washing dishes? Yuantong chuckled, a sound like water over stones. I'm saying enlightenment is not separate from washing dishes, not special, not elsewhere, not waiting in some future moment when you've finally practiced enough. Where did you expect to find it? Floating above your life, hidden in texts, locked away until you've earned it through suffering. He stood again, this time holding a basket of freshly pulled radishes. Joshu, the Buddha you seek has been eating rice with your mouth, walking with your feet, confused with your mind. When you wash your bowl, who washes? When you taste tea, who tastes? Find that one, and you'll stop looking over your breakfast for enlightenment. That evening, Joshu washed his bowl. But for the first time in 3 years, he truly washed it. Felt the warmth of the water, the smoothness of the ceramic, the small chip on the rim he'd never noticed. As he dried it with careful attention, something shifted. Not the dramatic opening he had imagined, but a quiet recognition. This moment, exactly as it was, lacked nothing. The Buddha taught, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. What changes is not the activities, but our relationship to them, not the world, but our presence within it. Tonight, as you rest here at the threshold of sleep, you might recognize Joshu's dilemma in your own seeking. Perhaps you've been looking over tonight's simple breathing for some special state of rest. Maybe you've been washing today's experiences with your mind, while hoping tomorrow will bring the peace you seek. But what if Master Yuan Tong's pointing applies to this very moment? Have you eaten your dinner? Then digest it peacefully. Have you finished your day? Then let it go completely. The sleep you seek isn't hiding in some technique you haven't mastered or some state you haven't achieved. It's as close as your next breath, as ordinary as washing dishes, as available as breakfast rice. Feel how the mind wants to complicate this simplicity, to make rest into another achievement, another goal to chase. But bodies have been finding sleep since before words existed to describe it. The wisdom is already written in your cells, programmed in your breath, available in the ordinary miracle of letting go. Joshu searched everywhere for Buddha except in the one place Buddha always resided, the ordinary moments of his daily life. You might be searching everywhere for rest except in the one place it always waits. This present moment, exactly as it is, requiring nothing special, asking only for your complete presence. What if tonight's rest is as simple as washing your bowl? Not a mystical practice, but a natural completion. You've lived today, now let it go. You've carried consciousness through another day, now set it down. You've eaten from life's table, now clean your bowl with the simple attention of one who knows there's nowhere else enlightenment could hide. Master Yuan Tong returned to his radishes, Joshu to his bowl, and in that return to the ordinary, the extraordinary revealed itself, not as something special, but as the very heart of what had always been present. Tonight you're invited to the same recognition. The peace you seek isn't waiting in some future moment of perfect meditation. It's here in the warm darkness, in the weight of your body, in the rhythm of breath that knows its way home without any instruction from your seeking mind. Have you lived your day? Then rest. Have you done your best? Then let that be enough. The ultimate truth Joshu sought was hiding in plain sight, in rice bowls and radishes, in garden dirt and wash water, in the simple completeness of each ordinary moment, met with extraordinary presence. Sleep, like enlightenment, isn't achieved but recognized. It's been waiting all along, patient as a master gardener, simple as breakfast rice, close as your next breath. Stop looking over your tiredness for some special state. Meet this moment fully and discover that rest was never anywhere else. Go wash your bowl, which is to say, complete this day with the same attention you've given to seeking rest. In that completion, that simple presence to what is, the door to sleep swings open by itself, revealing that you were always already home. Our next story reveals how the deepest truths often bypass the thinking mind entirely, arriving through the simplest experiences. This is the story of Master Nanin and a cup of tea. During the Meiji era in Japan, when old wisdom met new learning, there lived a Zen master named Nanin. His temple sat quietly at the edge of the bustling capital, a pool of stillness in the rushing current of modernization. Unlike masters who wrapped themselves in mystery, Nanin was known for his directness, his ability to cut through complexity with actions so simple they left visitors either enlightened or entirely confused. One autumn afternoon, as maple leaves painted the temple grounds in fire, a university professor arrived at Nanin's gate. Professor Ogawa was a man of considerable reputation, author of numerous books on philosophy, student of both Eastern and Western thought, his mind a library of concepts and theories. He had read extensively about Zen, analyzed its paradoxes, compared its teachings to other schools. Now he came seeking direct instruction from a living master. The temple attendant led him to a simple room where Nanin sat, appearing more like a grandfather than a renowned teacher. The master's eyes held a quality of amused attention, as if everything in life were both deeply serious and delightfully playful. Professor Ogawa bowed formally and launched into his purpose. Master Nanin, I have studied Zen intellectually for many years. I understand the concept of emptiness, the theory of non-duality, the various stages of enlightenment described in the texts. But I feel something is missing, the living experience behind these ideas. I've come seeking your instruction on the essential nature of Zen. Nanin listened politely, nodding. When the professor paused, expecting a profound response, the master simply said, "Would you like some tea?" Slightly taken aback by this mundane response to his philosophical inquiry, the professor agreed. Perhaps this was merely a social courtesy before the real teaching began. Nanin prepared the tea with unhurried movements, each gesture carrying a quality of complete attention. The professor watched impatiently, his mind already formulating the questions he would ask once this ritual was complete. Steam rose from the pot like incense, the room filled with the green scent of finest sencha. When the tea was ready, Nanin placed a cup before his guest and began to pour. The professor, lost in thought about consciousness and Buddha nature, barely noticed. He was mentally organizing his questions about the relationship between form and emptiness, the paradox of seeking what is already present, the methodology of sudden versus gradual enlightenment. The cup filled. The amber liquid reached the brim, but Nanin continued pouring. Tea overflowed the rim, spreading across the low table, dripping onto the professor's expensive hakama, pooling on the tatami mats. Still Nanin poured, his expression serene and focused. "Stop!" Professor Ogawa cried, jumping back. "What are you doing? The cup is full. No more will go in." Nanin set down the pot and looked at his guest with gentle eyes. "Exactly so. And like this cup, you are full of your own ideas, theories, and concepts about Zen. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" The professor sat in stunned silence, his wet clothes forgotten. In one simple action, Nanin had revealed the barrier between intellectual understanding and direct experience. All his knowledge about Zen had become the very thing preventing him from experiencing Zen. "But Master," he finally managed, "surely understanding is important. Surely knowledge helps guide us toward truth." Nanin refreshed their cups, properly this time, and raised his own to his lips. "Tell me, Professor," he said after taking a sip, "which understands tea better, your tongue or your mind?" The professor considered this. "Well, the mind understands the concept of tea, its properties, its cultural significance. And the tongue knows the taste." "Then taste your tea," Nanin suggested. "Not with your mind, but with your tongue. Not the idea of tea, but this actual tea, in this cup, at this temperature, in this moment." As the Zen saying goes, the finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. All the professor's concepts about Zen were fingers. Nanin was offering the moon itself. Professor Ogawa lifted his cup, and for perhaps the first time in years, he did nothing but drink tea, not analyzing its flavor compounds, not comparing it to other teas, not thinking about the Zen significance of the tea ceremony, just drinking tea. The taste was extraordinary, not because it was special tea, but because for once he was fully present to taste it. The warmth spreading through his chest, the subtle bitterness yielding to sweetness, the way the fragrance rose to meet the flavor. All of this had been available in every cup he'd ever drunk, waiting only for his complete attention. "Ah," said Nanin, seeing the change in his guest's face. "Now you are beginning to taste Zen." "But I'm just drinking tea," the professor protested, though his protest lacked conviction. "Just drinking tea," Nanin repeated with a smile. "Tell me, Professor, in all your books about Zen, did you ever find anything more profound than just drinking tea? When you are truly present to this simple act, where is the seeker? Where is enlightenment? Where is the distance between you and Buddha?" They sat in silence, drinking tea. With each sip, the professor felt his carefully constructed understanding dissolving like sugar in hot water. He had come seeking profound teachings and received only tea. Yet in that simplicity lay profundity deeper than any philosophy. When it was time to leave, Professor Ogawa bowed deeply. "Master, I came with a full cup, thinking it contained wisdom. You've shown me it contained only obstacles." Nanin walked him to the gate. "Come again any time," he said. "We'll have tea." The professor returned many times. Sometimes they discussed Buddhism, sometimes they sat in silence, but always they drank tea. And in that simple sharing, Professor Ogawa discovered what no amount of study could have revealed: that Zen is not a concept to be grasped, but a reality to be lived, one sip at a time. The Buddha taught, "My teaching is not a philosophy. It is the result of direct experience. The things I say come from my own experience. You can confirm them all by your own experience." Nanin offered the professor that direct experience in the most ordinary way possible, through tea. Tonight, as you rest here, you might notice your own cup is quite full. Perhaps with ideas about how sleep should come, theories about relaxation, concepts about what peaceful rest means. Like Professor Ogawa, you may be trying to think your way into an experience that requires no thought at all. What if you could empty that cup? Not by forcing out the thoughts, but by shifting attention from the thinking about rest to the simple experience of resting. Like the difference between knowing about tea and tasting tea. There's a world of difference between understanding sleep intellectually and simply sleeping. Feel the parallel to Nanin's teaching in this very moment. You could analyze the weight of your body on the bed, or you could simply feel it. You could think about your breathing, or you could taste the air flowing in and out. You could conceptualize relaxation, or you could drink it in like tea. Immediate, warm, requiring no explanation. The professor's wet clothes dried, but the teaching remained. When we're too full of knowing, there's no room for experiencing. When we're so busy thinking about life, we miss living it. When we're analyzing rest, we're not resting. Nanin's genius was recognizing that some truths can't be spoken, only tasted. Some wisdom can't be taught, only discovered. Some experiences, like tea, like rest, like this moment, are perfect teachers when we stop trying to learn from them and simply receive what they offer. Let tonight's rest be your cup of tea. Not an idea about rest, but the actual experience. This darkness, this quiet, this gradual letting go. Taste it without commentary. Receive it without analysis. Let it teach you what no words could convey about the simple art of sleeping. And if your mind protests that it needs to understand, remember Professor Ogawa, soaking wet with tea, suddenly realizing that understanding was the very thing in his way. Sometimes wisdom arrives not through what we grasp, but through what we're willing to spill. Not through what we know, but through what we're brave enough to not know. Empty your cup. Taste this moment. Let the simple tea of rest flow in, warm and welcoming, requiring nothing from you but your willingness to receive. In that receiving, like the professor in Nanin's simple room, you might discover that what you sought through complexity was always available in simplicity, waiting in the ordinary miracle of just this moment, just this breath, just this letting go. Let us now explore a story about finding clarity through stillness rather than struggle. This is the story of the muddy water. In a monastery where morning bells had called seekers to meditation for centuries, there lived a young nun named Sujata. She had come to the temple carrying a mind like a storm, thoughts crashing against each other, emotions swirling without rest, memories and futures tangling into knots that meditation only seemed to tighten. For months she sat on her cushion, fighting her thoughts like a warrior in battle. When anxiety arose, she attacked it with concentration. When memories surfaced, she pushed them down with force. When planning thoughts appeared, she met them with fierce determination to stay present. Yet the harder she fought, the more agitated her mind became, like a snow globe shaken continuously, never allowed to settle. One day, exhausted from another sleepless night of mental combat, she approached the master, an elderly woman whose presence carried the quality of a mountain lake, deep, clear, undisturbed. "Master," Sujata said, desperation threading through her voice, "I came here to find peace, but my mind is muddier than ever. The more I meditate, the worse it becomes. Thoughts assault me from all directions. Please, teach me a technique to clear my mind. Show me how to force these thoughts into stillness." The master studied her with compassionate eyes that had witnessed this struggle in countless students. Without speaking, she rose and gestured for Sujata to follow. They walked in silence through the temple grounds to a small pond at the garden's edge. Recent rains had stirred the pond. Its water, usually mirror clear, was now brown with sediment, opaque as chocolate. The master picked up a long stick and handed it to Sujata. "Clear this water," she instructed simply. Eager to prove her dedication, Sujata began stirring the stick through the water, trying to somehow separate the mud from the clear water she knew must be there. But with each movement, the water grew murkier. She tried different techniques, swift strokes, gentle circles, jabbing motions to perhaps settle the dirt to the bottom. Nothing worked. The more she stirred, the muddier it became. After watching these futile efforts, the master gently took the stick from Sujata's hands. "Now," she said, "let's try another way. She laid the stick on the ground and sat on a nearby rock, motioning for Sujata to join her. They sat in silence, watching the pond. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The water remained as muddy as before. But as the minutes passed, something shifted. The heaviest particles began to drift downward. The water's frantic swirling slowed. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, clarity began to emerge, not from the top down or bottom up, but throughout the whole pond simultaneously. After an hour, the water had transformed. Clear as crystal, it reflected the sky, the surrounding trees, their own watching faces. The mud hadn't disappeared. It rested peacefully at the bottom, but it no longer clouded the water's essential clarity. "Tell me," the master said softly, "what cleared the water?" Sujata pondered. "Nothing cleared it. We simply stopped stirring it." "And the clarity, did we create it or reveal it?" "It was always there," Sujata realized, "hidden by the agitation, but never absent." The master nodded. "Your mind is this pond. The thoughts, emotions, memories, they are the mud. Not impurities to be eliminated, but natural parts of the ecosystem. When you fight them, you stir the waters. When you try to force clarity, you create more cloudiness." As the Zen master Foyan taught, the mind is originally pure. It's just covered by passing thoughts. It's like the sun covered by clouds. The sun itself is never stained. "But master," Sujata protested, "are you saying I should do nothing? Just let thoughts run wild?" "Watch the pond again," the master suggested. "Is it doing nothing?" "No, it's following its nature. Particles settle according to their weight. Water finds its level. Clarity emerges not through effort, but through natural law. Your mind has the same capacity. When you stop stirring it with efforts to control, fix, or eliminate thoughts, its natural clarity emerges." They sat longer, watching dragonflies touch the now clear surface, creating ripples that spread and faded without disturbing the depths. "But what if urgent thoughts arise?" Sujata asked. "What if important things need attention?" The master smiled. "When mud settles in clear water, you can see exactly what's there. A leaf, a stone, a stick. You can reach in and pick up what needs attention without clouding the whole pond. But when water is murky from constant stirring, you can't see anything clearly. Important or unimportant, all becomes one confused swirl." That night, Sujata sat in meditation with a completely different approach. When thoughts arose, and they did, in their hundreds, she didn't attack them. She didn't stir the waters trying to achieve clarity. She simply sat, like she had sat by the pond, allowing her mind to follow its nature. At first, the muddy waters of her consciousness swirled with their usual chaos. But without her constant agitation, something began to shift. Like sediment in water, the heaviest thoughts settled first. The deep anxieties that had seemed so solid began to rest at the bottom of awareness. The lighter worries continued to float a while longer. Then they too found their level. By dawn, she experienced something unprecedented. Not the forced blankness she had been seeking, but a natural clarity in which thoughts could arise and pass, like clouds reflected in still water, present but not disturbing the depths. The Buddha taught, mind is like water. When agitated, it's difficult to see. When calm, everything becomes clear. Sujata had discovered this truth not through philosophy, but through patient observation of muddy water becoming clear. Tonight, as you lie here preparing for rest, you might recognize your own muddy pond. The day's accumulated thoughts, tomorrow's concerns, fragments of conversations, and unfinished tasks, all swirling in the waters of consciousness. And perhaps, like Sujata, you've been stirring these waters, trying to force them into clarity, creating more agitation with your very efforts to find peace. What if you could put down the stick? What if the path to clear mind isn't through doing, but through not doing? Not the not doing of giving up, but the wise not doing of allowing natural processes to unfold. Feel how even now, without any effort from you, gravity is settling your body into the bed. Without any instruction, your breathing is finding its rhythm. Without any force, your temperature is adjusting to the room. Your body knows how to settle. Your mind has the same wisdom if you stop stirring it with attempts to control. Like the master by the pond, you can simply witness. Watch how thoughts swirl when you engage with them, how they settle when you don't. Notice how clarity isn't something you create, but something that emerges when conditions allow. The muddy water teaches patience. It can't be rushed into clarity. Stirring only delays the settling. So too with tonight's transition into sleep. The more you agitate your mind with efforts to sleep, the more elusive rest becomes. But when you stop stirring, when you trust the natural settling that knows its own timing, clarity emerges. And here's the deepest teaching the pond offers. The mud doesn't disappear. It remains part of the ecosystem, necessary and natural. Tomorrow it may be stirred again by new rains, but knowing that clarity is always there beneath temporary cloudiness, you need never panic at the mind's muddy moments. Let tonight be your pond-sitting practice. No stick to stir with, no technique to apply, no enemy thoughts to battle. Just the patient witnessing of consciousness settling into its own clarity, mud finding its level, and the clear water of awareness, which was never actually disturbed, revealing itself once again. The master and student sat by the pond until sunset, watching light play on water that had found its own perfection without any help from them. Tonight, may you discover the same truth, that the peace you seek comes not through effort, but through allowing the beautiful, natural settling that is always trying to occur. Rest now like water that has remembered its clarity. Let the sediment of the day settle where it will, and trust that beneath all temporary cloudiness, your essential nature, clear, peaceful, already perfect, waits patiently to reflect the stars. As we draw our time together to a close, let these ancient stories settle into your consciousness like seeds in fertile ground. Each tale has offered its own medicine, its own doorway into peace, yet all point toward the same essential truth, that the rest you seek has been within you all along, waiting patiently for your recognition. From the empty boat, you learn to see how many of tonight's disturbances carry no real intention to harm. The sacred mountain reminded you that wisdom needs no special conditions, breathing equally through this ordinary moment. The one cricket in the temple showed how peace speaks in whispers beneath the noise, available to those who truly listen. Through the broken teacup, you discovered how accepting impermanence brings deeper appreciation for this fleeting night. The gift of anger revealed your power to choose what you accept into your heart. The two arrows taught the difference between unavoidable tiredness and the suffering you add through resistance. You walked with monks who knew when to pick up and when to put down, tasted strawberries in the midst of uncertainty, and learned from farmers that tonight's restlessness might be tomorrow's gift. You saw masters find the sacred in muddy roads, create paradise through a single choice, and give freely while losing nothing. Through arches and mirrors, boats and moons, you've discovered that mastery isn't about perfection, but presence. That paths are many, but destination one. That what you seek was never hidden, only overlooked in its ordinariness. The Buddha taught, there are only two mistakes one can make along the road to truth: not going all the way and not starting. Tonight, you've started. With each story, each breath, each moment of letting go, you've taken another step on the ancient path that leads from restlessness to rest, from seeking to finding, from separation to coming home. Now, as the stories fade into silence and words dissolve into the darkness, what remains? Only this: the quiet awareness that has listened, the gentle presence that needs no story to exist, the natural peace that comes when we stop trying to be anywhere other than here. Let your breathing find its own rhythm now, like a boat finding its current after the oars are shipped. Let thoughts settle like sediment in still water, clarifying the depths beneath. Let your body remember what it knew before you learned to try. That rest comes not through effort, but through trust. Not through doing, but through undoing. The masters have spoken their truths and returned to silence. The stories have pointed their fingers at the moon and dissolved back into emptiness. What remains is what was always here: the simple miracle of awareness settling into itself, finding its home in the welcoming darkness. From Moonmine Temple, we bid you peaceful rest. May you wake refreshed, carrying into tomorrow not the weight of these words, but the lightness they pointed toward. May you remember, in difficult moments, that you already possess everything needed for peace. And may you discover, again and again, that the deepest teachings are written not in ancient texts, but in the quiet wisdom of your own resting heart. Sleep now, held by the same silence that holds the mountains, blessed by the same peace that blessed the Buddha, free as the monks who learned that letting go is the highest practice and coming home the only journey. The stories end, but their truth continues in you. Rest well, dream gently, and wake tomorrow a little more aware of the beauty that was always here, waiting in the ordinary mystery of being alive. Sweet dreams.